Chapter 1. Muyu, quickly get up and get ready. It's already dawn. Village Chief Oldbu sat beside Muyu's bed and shook Muyu. Oh! Muyu opened his eyes and sleepily looked at the few stars in the sky outside the window. The sky was not bright yet, and the rooster had not crowed yet. He smacked his lips and closed his eyes again. Muyu, don't laze around in bed. Today is an extraordinary day. You are the second child in our flowing water village to become an immortal master in 10 years. We must go there early and try to leave a good impression on the immortal master. Village Chief Oldbu beamed with joy. Okay, Muyu groggily replied as he pulled the quilt. Muyu, you must work hard. Every year I am mocked by the other villages. They say that our village is full of cowards. It is rare for a child to become an immortal master. You don't know how angry I am. Village Chief Oldbu was not convinced when he thought of that. Okay. Muyu scratched his stomach. His voice sounded like he was talking in his sleep. In the past 10 years, 5 children in the neighboring Gani village became an immortal master. That's an average of 1 every 2 years. Their rate of becoming an immortal is much higher than ours. That big village is even more impressive. It is said that they have at least 2 immortal masters every year. Look at them. In the past 10 years, they have 20 immortal masters, and we have only 2 in 10 years. Don't you think that's infuriating? Village Chief Oldbu rambled on. It was not clear whether Muyu heard him or not. Infuriating. Muyu turned over and mumbled. Don't sleep anymore. Hurry up and get up. I have to change your clothes and dress you up. When you become an immortal master in the future, you can't be too wasteful. Village Chief Oldbu looked at Muyu's sleepy face with disappointment. This child had finally become the second person in 10 years to become an immortal master, but he was always so indifferent. He did not care at all about what it meant to become an immortal master. All right. Muyu flipped over and stretched his leg out of the blanket to rest on Village Chief's thigh. He was drooling slightly. Just now, he dreamt of eating the delicious braised fish and was craving for it. Are you getting up or not? If not, I'm going to hit someone. Rise. Muyu's eyes were still closed. Village Chief Oldbu had never hit him before. I made your favorite braised fish early in the morning. If you don't want it, I'll throw it away. Eat. Muyu reflexively sat up. His eyes glowed as he wiped the saliva off the corner of his mouth. Then, under the gaze of Oldbu, who didn't know whether to laugh or cry, Muyu rushed to the kitchen in his underwear. This little foodie. Village Chief Oldbu shook his head helplessly as he picked up Muyu's clothes from the chair and walked towards the kitchen. Village Chief Oldbu chuckled as he looked at Muyu wolfing down his food. He patted Muyu's head and said, Becoming an immortal master is something that brings honor to your ancestors. You must work hard. Not everyone can become an immortal master. They can fly around and do anything. Even us mortals have to kneel down when we see an immortal master. When you finish your studies and come back, your status will be different. Last year, when Louis E. from the Dian village came back from Chingsong School, the Dian village specially decorated the village with lanterns and colored banners. Fireworks and firecrackers filled the sky. I was very envious when I saw that. Yes, I remember that. That day, the fireworks and firecrackers burned down the granary. Their fire prevention awareness is too poor. Muyu continued to eat the rice in his bowl and took big bites of the braised fish made by the village chief. This was his favorite. Everyone in the village knew that Muyu was an orphan. More than 10 years ago, a pregnant woman came to the village and gave birth to him. When Muyu was 2 years old, Muyu's mother left without saying goodbye. No one would have thought that Muyu's mother would be so heartless as to abandon Muyu, who was only 2 years old. Fortunately, the village chief adopted him. Now that he was 12 years old, he met the requirements to enroll in the school. Yes, this shows that safety awareness is very important. Our village should also hold a fire drill next time to explain effective fire prevention measures to everyone. But that's not the point. The point is that they have an immortal master. An immortal master, do you understand? The village chief realized that he was being led astray by Muyu. He immediately knocked on Muyu's head and changed the topic. Every year, People would come to the village to test the bone structure of the 12-year-old children. If they passed, they would be sent to the school in town. The school was cultivation. This world was not as simple as one imagined. Cultivation was the path to success. Great cultivators could break cliffs with a wave of their sleeves and move mountains to fill seas. Everyone longed to have the aptitude to cultivate. Everyone hoped that they could be ranked among the strong and pursue immortality to look down on the world. Muyu stuck out his tongue and muttered, "If that immortal master is so powerful, why didn't he cast some spells to put out the fire?" The village chief twirled his beard and was also somewhat puzzled. He slowly said, Maybe that immortal master's spell was still in the cool-down period? Aya, how would we know about the world of immortals? Maybe that day was not the auspicious day to cast the spell. Ha ha. Muyu laughed dryly. Casting spells needed to look at the almanac? The old man's imagination was quite wild. Muyu didn't want to cultivate, even though this was an opportunity that many people would kill to obtain. Muyu had his own reasons. No one in the village knew that Muyu often had a strange dream. In the dream, there was a figure like a Rakshasa ghost god. Human lives were like ants in the hands of that person. That person wantonly massacred humans. Blood flowed like a river, and the people were in a terrible situation. In Muyu's dream, the sky was dark red, the moon was blood red, and the river was crimson red. Everything seemed to be for the sake of slaughter. When Muyu wanted to know who that Rakshasa ghost god was, he would always wake up at that time. Then his whole body would be drenched in sweat. That Rakshasa ghost god is the so-called cultivator, right? Muyu thought like this in his heart. Therefore, he unconsciously resisted the cultivator. He himself did not know why he had this dream, and also did not understand what this dream meant. He felt that it was better for him to quietly stay in this peaceful village. Being close to the village chief was enough. Becoming an immortal master might not necessarily be better than him. He thought like this, but the village chief did not think so. This old man doesn't have any extravagant hopes. I only hope that you can enter a good immortal sect and give our village chief some face so that I can raise my head in front of outsiders. The village chief rubbed his hands and said to Muyu with a face full of hope. Oh, Muyu picked up a piece of bacon and felt that something was wrong. Wasn't this kind of meat usually only available during festivals? Today was also not a festival. Muyu raised his head and suspiciously asked, Grandpa Village Chief, why are you willing to cook bacon? If you leave like this, you won't be able to eat this old man's cooking for a long time. How can Grandpa be stingy? The village chief patted Muyu's shoulder and said with a smile. Muyu was silent for a long time and looked around. The village chief did not have any children and had always treated Muyu as his own grandson. He was a kind person and had worked hard all his life. His wish was also very simple. Muyu laughed. Don't worry, Grandpa. When I come back, you can also go around showing off. How could he refuse the wish of an old man? Yes, next time when you come back, I will take you out to other villages for a walk. Let others broaden their horizons. Our village also has good seeds. The village chief said with a smile. Muyu blinked his eyes. Take him out? Walk. How did he become a mule? Grandpa Village Chief, it is to show off, to show off. Muyu kindly reminded. Yes, to show off. The village chief proudly said. Chapter 2. Amidst the long-winded chatter, Muyu finally burped and stretched in satisfaction. The old man had said a lot of things with a smile of exultation, but he didn't know how much Muyu had heard. He put down the bowl and chopsticks and said, I'm going to help you chop the firewood. Muyu had to chop firewood for the village chief every day, so he couldn't eat for free. Although the village chief was simple and kind and didn't mind Muyu freeloading, Muyu couldn't live with it in his heart. But today the village chief stopped him. The village chief said cheerfully, No need, no need. I still have to bring you to town later. In the future, when you become an immortal master, this old man will have to kneel down and worship you. How would I dare ask you to chop firewood? Isn't kneeling down the same as kneeling to death? Grandpa, I'm still fine, Muyu said with a smile. Don't worry. In the future, I'll take care of Grandpa when you're old. If anyone dares to bully Grandpa, I'll raise my hand and beat them up. I don't need to wait for an auspicious day when I use magic. Go away. What kneeling to death? The village chief hurriedly waved his hand, but his face was still filled with gratification. Little child, with these words, this old man is much happier. Quickly go back and pack up. I'll bring you to the school in town later. In fact, Muyu didn't have anything valuable to pack. If there was anything valuable, it was probably only the blue stone he wore around his neck. At least, Muyu thought it was a rock because it was green and covered in moss. He originally thought it was a piece of jade. In the end, the village's old pedant said it was just an ordinary rock. If it was a rock, then it was a rock. It was left behind by his mother. Although Muyu didn't have any impression of his mother, he still habitually hung this blue stone around his neck. His clothes were all given to him by the kind-hearted people in the village. They were washed until they were white, but they still fit, so he simply packed 2 pieces of clothes and came back. He didn't expect that when he returned to the village chief's place, he would find many villagers already waiting there. Muyu, you really gave us face. Don't forget about us in the future. You're really promising. In a few years, I'll betroth my second daughter to you. Muyu, these are the shoes that Auntie sewed for you last night. Take care of yourself. There was finally a second person who could go to school in the village in 10 years. Many villagers came to see Muyu off. Muyu was very popular in the village, so everyone liked him very much. When he heard that the 10-year-old area was still sniffling, Muyu felt that it was still too early for him to get married. Thank you, Annie Wong. Thank you, Uncle Pang. Thank you, everyone. I can't take it anymore. Muyu's hands seemed to be stuffed with all kinds of things. Clothes, socks, fruits, eggs. When he came to his senses, he realized that he was holding a rooster in his right hand. What the hell was going on? Did he really have to bring these things to the academy? Who was the one who gave him this rooster? Muyu was a little confused. In fact, all the simple villagers were like this. It was not easy for the village to have an immortal apprentice. Wouldn't they want to curry favor with him? He was distressed as he hugged the crumbling things in his arms and stuffed them all on the table in the village head's house. Looking at the messy scene, Muyu also had a headache. He shouted loudly, "Villagers, quiet first, quiet first. Don't talk, don't talk. Listen to the lecture of our future immortal master." Uncle Wong's voice was loud, and it took him a lot of effort to calm everyone down. Muyu smiled helplessly and said, "Villagers, you've been good to me. Muyu won't forget it. I can't take these things. You can take them back later. If I succeed in my studies in the future, I won't forget you. Thank you again." Under the crowd, Muyu finally squeezed out of the crowd and walked towards the entrance of the village with the village chief. The village chief happily walked in front and even hummed a little song. Muyu followed behind with a bitter expression. At the entrance of the village, there was a statue of a young man. Unfortunately, the carving was not very fine. It looked like the eyes were protruding and the nose was slanted. It was as ugly as it could be. The village chief stopped in front of the statue and solemnly bowed. His mouth was mumbling something, but no one knew what he was talking about. Muyu faintly heard the village chief say something like "bless the village" and "immortal master above." How could Muyu not know about this ugly statue? 10 years ago, another child in this village became an immortal master. The villagers erected a statue for him, saying that they wanted to sing his praises and make him famous in the future. Muyu never understood what kind of merit this fellow had. He only took his parents away and had nothing to do with the rest of the village. Muyu, this is the immortal master from 10 years ago. The villagers have become successful, so naturally, we have to commemorate them. In the future, this old man will also erect a statue for you. What do you think? I'll burn incense for you every day. The village head turned to Muyu and said kindly after he finished nagging. Muyu immediately shook his head. No matter how he heard it, it sounded strange. Grandpa, don't mess around. You will always be my grandpa. How can a grandpa worship his grandson? Then I won't erect a statue. But what if this old man misses you? How about I find someone to draw your portrait and then hang it up and burn incense for you every day? The village chief said while stroking his beard. Hang a portrait and burn incense? Something didn't seem right, but he couldn't tell what was wrong. The two's village was located in the mountains. If they wanted to walk to the town, it would take half a day. The mountain road was rugged, and they also had to be wary of large wild beasts. Fortunately, a few villages in the mountains had jointly opened up a relatively safe and convenient mountain road. Therefore, as long as they didn't deviate from the main road, the wild beasts in the mountains wouldn't come and cause trouble. Muyu also knew about these things. He had also been to the town. Sometimes, the hunters in the village would need to bring their prey to the town to sell. Muyu had also played with them before, so he was not unfamiliar with this road. The two walked for a while and turned a corner. Suddenly, a middle-aged man with a stocky back and a bear's waist came out from the side of a tree. Muyu knew this person. He was Old Zhang, who made a living by hunting in the village. "Village chief, are you bringing little Muyu to the town?" Old Zhang pulled a bow in his hand with an arrow nocked on it. He looked a little vigilant as he asked, "Yes, what's wrong? Didn't you go hunting early in the morning? Why did you come here?" "Village chief," Old Bu asked. "Generally speaking, there were no wild beasts in this area. Hunters usually went to another mountain to hunt, where there was more prey." Lao Zhang put down the bow and arrow in his hand and said, "We were chasing a grizzly bear. The grizzly bear was hit by an arrow and ran here. We don't know where it went now. Dalong and Erlang went to chase it. I'll stay here and remind everyone not to take this road." "That won't do. I still have to bring Muyu to the academy. We can't waste time." If they did not take this road, they would have to take a long detour. Village chief Olbu took the matter of becoming an immortal master very seriously. He would not delay his journey because of such a trivial matter. "Then I'll escort you there." "I'm worried about the two of you taking this road alone," Old Zhang said. "No. What if another villager takes this road later? You stay here. We'll go by ourselves." Olbu waved his hand. "But the two of you," Old Zhang hesitated. "What's wrong with the two of us? No matter what, I was a good hunter when I was young. I can even deal with two bears, let alone one." Village chief Olbu had not gone out hunting for many years, but he still had the experience of the past, so he did not admit that he was old. "It's okay, Uncle Zhang. I'll take care of the village chief," Muyu said with a grin. Although he had never really fought with a wild beast before, Muyu had learned a lot of experience when they chatted, so he was not afraid. "Then, okay. You have to be careful," Old Zhang said helplessly. "I'm the one taking care of you. Let me tell you, you haven't really experienced hunting before. It's a skill. If you want to know whether a wild beast is easy to deal with, you have to look at its eyes first. Wild beasts also have intelligence, and you can read a lot of information from their eyes." Along the way, the village chief had been giving Muyu tutoring lessons, such as fire prevention, burglary, and demonic beasts. Then, he talked about the common principles of life, such as not being too serious, the outside world was dangerous, and learning to act according to other people's expressions, and a real man should know when to advance and when to retreat. Muyu could recite all of these like the back of his hand. The village chief often held lectures in the village when he had nothing to do, to teach the immature children about life. Muyu also liked to go because there were free candies to eat. As for what the village chief was talking about, who knew? The two walked for a long time, but there was nothing strange in the surroundings. The village chief was still talking about his life experience, and he couldn't wait to impart all of his knowledge to Muyu. Muyu smacked his lips, already used to the calluses in his ears. "That's why I'm telling you, if you have a conflict with someone, don't use your mouth if you can, and don't use your mouth if you have to. This is the most important part." The village chief was still tirelessly pouring out his life's experience to Muyu. Muyu picked his ears, and a helpless expression appeared on his face. "Then when should I make a move? When should I use my mouth?" Muyu asked with a yawn. "That's part of the question. You have to learn how to read people's expressions. If the other party is aggressive and unreasonable, then don't waste your breath. Just directly attack them. Anyway, roar." At this moment, a huge grizzly bear suddenly roared and ran over from the end of the mountain road. Every step it took made the ground tremble slightly. The bear was as tall as two people, and its paws were even bigger than Muyu's face. It felt like even a piece of iron would be smashed into pieces with a single slap. There was an arrow stuck in the grizzly bear's chest. Muyu recognized that it was the bow they usually use for hunting. Muyu actually encountered it. At this moment, the grizzly bear was still bleeding. When it saw Muyu and the old man, the grizzly bear knew that they were easier to bully than the other hunters, so it immediately ran towards the two of them in anger. Grandpa, village chief, the other party is aggressive, and there's no point in talking nonsense. So should we make a move? Muyu rubbed his hands together and said with his eyes shining, "Move aside, it's just a small bear. I'll shoot it through the heart. This arrow must be shot by Erlang. His arrow has no strength at all. I'm going to scold him when I get back." Village chief Old Boo quickly took out a pocket-sized bow from his back. This bow was made by Old Boo himself, and he usually carried it with him when he went out. Although it was small, it was very lethal. Grandpa village chief, shoot its eyes. Muyu gestured with interest. Shoot my ass. Hurry up and run. I forgot to bring an arrow. Chapter 3. The village chief shivered and blamed himself for his carelessness. He quickly pulled Muyu and ran into the woods. He knew that they couldn't run along the mountain path. It was impossible for them to outrun the bear. Only through the woods could they get rid of it. The bear was injured, but it was still a strong beast. It was much faster than the two of them in the woods. It quickly locked onto their figures and gradually closed the distance between them. "Grandpa, we can't outrun it." Muyu used to go hunting with the village's hunter uncle, so his stamina was very good. In fact, he was very experienced with bears. He had even thought of many ways to deal with this bear, but he rejected many of them. He was worried about something. After all, the village chief was old. After running for a while, he slowed down. Seeing that the bear was getting closer and closer, Muyu couldn't help but feel a little anxious. When a bear was injured, it would go crazy, especially when it saw these two thin and weak humans. It would be a fight to the death. At this time, even if they fell down and pretended to be dead, it would be useless. Erlang, shooting an arrow is like not shooting at all. The bear is not affected at all. The village chief panted and said, "Muyu, you hurry up and run. Don't worry about me. Go to town by yourself. I won't leave you behind." In fact, Muyu wasn't very afraid of this bear. Perhaps ordinary children would be afraid, but Muyu was obviously not an ordinary child. He also had his own secrets. Muyu had never told anyone this secret, including his most respected village chief. Muyu frowned. He was thinking about something and seemed to be hesitating. In fact, he wasn't very worried about the upcoming danger. Instead, he was worried about something else. He didn't know how to explain it to the village chief. Perhaps no one could explain it to him. For Muyu, there were some things that were difficult to explain. Stop talking nonsense and run. I'll lure it away. Only then can one of us survive. You have to be a good immortal master and live up to everyone's expectations. As the village chief spoke, he stopped and turned around to run in the direction that Running Bear had come from. He was actually using himself as bait and sacrificing himself to buy time for Muyu to escape. Grandpa Village Chief. Muyu used the momentum to charge forward for a distance before stopping. When he turned around, he saw the grizzly bear raising its paw and smashing it down on the village chief's head. Muyu had forgotten many ways to subdue the grizzly bear. No matter how he thought about it, it didn't seem that important anymore. If something happened to the village chief, perhaps Muyu would feel guilty for the rest of his life. "Bastard, don't hurt my grandfather." With an angry roar, a sharp rustling sound suddenly rang out in the forest, as if something had broken through the air. After a muffled sound, a huge boom resounded through the forest. The ground seemed to tremble a little. Dust filled the air, leaves swirled in the air, and birds in the forest flapped their wings and flew into the sky. The grizzly bear fell to the ground. There was not only a broken arrow in its chest, but also 2 brown roots as thick as a wrist. It was these 2 seemingly inconspicuous roots that had pierced the grizzly bear's body and nailed it to the ground. It was as if the grizzly bear's body was made of paper and could not withstand a single blow. The grizzly bear might not have thought that it would die so inexplicably. Perhaps a hunter's arrow could kill it, but how could it die from 2 roots? It was a beast with rough skin and thick flesh. The roots were not worth mentioning at all in front of it. The roots in front of the grizzly bear's chest were brown, mixed with a trace of soil and trickling blood. The twisted roots came from the air and formed an arch that stretched all the way to Muyu's feet. There was only a patch of soil under Muyu's feet, only covered by a mess of leaves. There was nothing unusual about it, but it was on this patch of soil that two roots grew out of it, very abruptly piercing the grizzly bear's heart. Muyu sat on the ground, panting heavily as if all his strength had been sucked out of him. His whole body was a little weak. His arms were stretched forward, and his palms were in a grasping position. It looked a little strange. The roots wrapped around his arms, as if they had been growing on Muyu's hands for a long time. The village chief opened his eyes and climbed up from the ground in horror. He had dealt with a lot of beasts when he was young, so he naturally knew what would happen if the grizzly bear slapped him. He could even imagine the scene of his head being smashed and then blooming. He thought he was dead, but he did not expect the roots to come out of nowhere to wrap around his waist and pull him back. The other two roots pierced through his head, and then the grizzly bear fell straight down and gradually died. The village chief turned around and saw Muyu's strange posture. If he still could not figure out what was going on, then he would have lived for so long in vain. His face suddenly turned pale. Compared to the threat he had just received, Muyu had brought him more shock. "You?" The village chief's eyes widened, and he took 2 steps back. He looked at Muyu in disbelief. His eyes did not show the joy of surviving a disaster, but shock and fear. It was as if he had seen a terrifying monster. Even when the grizzly bear wanted to kill him, he did not show such a look. He saw the roots wrapped around Muyu's arm. Even at that moment, they were moving rhythmically around Muyu's arm. This scene made the village chief look like a demon. Muyu pursed his lips. He looked at the village chief and did not know how to explain all of this. He was not afraid of the grizzly bear. He often went deep into mountains and forests, and he had seen many beasts. He could use trees to bind all kinds of beasts tightly, but he had never told the villagers about this because it was not normal. If the village chief had not risked his life to protect him, he would not have killed the grizzly bear so easily. At least, he would not have killed the grizzly bear in front of the village chief. You can control trees? You in Yaman. What is your relationship? The village chief's body trembled slightly. When he spoke of the Yumung devil clan, his eyes flashed with a trace of fear and hatred. It was as if the Yumung devil clan was a kind of bandit who burned, killed, and plundered. It was disgusting. But in the village chief's eyes, bandits were kinder than Yaman. Muyu lowered his head. He did not know what relationship he had with Yaman. He had never seen a Yaman before. He did not even know what a Yaman was. But he had heard of the Yaman. In fact, other than not having seen it with his own eyes, his understanding of the Yaman was probably second only to the village chief. How could he not have heard of the evil Yaman that the village chief talked about every day? Chapter 4. Yaman are the most evil beings in the world. Their goal has always been to exterminate humans. Wherever they exist, there will be misery and suffering. So why are there immortals among humans? These immortals cultivate powerful spells to fight against Yaman and exterminate Yaman. Therefore, all of you must work hard and become the immortals in the legends. Exterminate Yaman and protect humans. When Muyu was still wearing open crotch pants, the village head always liked to pull a group of children together and tell them about the outside world. The village head's philosophy was to instill common sense from the beginning. So he gathered all the children in the village to tell them stories when they were young. Grandpa Village Chief, what does a Yaman look like? Many children were not afraid. Even though the village chief described the Yaman to be magical, to the children, it was just a story. Yaman look fierce. They also have 2 hands and 2 feet, but they're different from humans. They have repulsive faces and are easy to recognize. But don't worry, many years ago, the Yumung Devil clan has already been chased away by our immortal masters. I only saw them once when you were young. Yaman, some of the Yumung Devils are green, like toads that have been marinated for a long time. Some of the Yumung Devils are black, like bears. Some of them are blue, but this one looks pretty good. The others are yellow, like the poop that Egg Face just pooped. The village chief pointed at the 2-year-old egg face and said, "Ha ha ha." The innocent children laughed. Only Muyu asked seriously, "What's so powerful about Yaman?" The village chief rubbed his chin and thought for a while before saying, "Yaman. Different colors have different abilities. The red Yaman that has been scalded can control fire. They specialize in setting fire to houses. They're the most hateful. Those pitch-black Yuming devils could control iron, such as hoes and sickles, and they would snatch them away. As for the blue Yuming demons, they can control water and turn it into ice to destroy our crops. As for the yellow Yuming demons, they can control soil and rocks. In the past, I have personally seen many people being buried by flying sand and rocks. As for the green Yuming demons, they can control trees and crops, causing us to have no food to eat. Yaman are very powerful. Some Yaman are so powerful that even immortals can't do anything to them. Then, can we control trees, flames, and the like?" At that time, little Muyu's expression was a little strange. He clenched his little hands. The village chief thought that he was afraid and didn't pay much attention. "We can't control these things. If we can, then there's an 80% chance that they are Yaman in disguise. Everyone, be careful," the village chief said seriously. "But Grandpa Village Chief, where are those Yaman? We want to see them too." Some of the curious children didn't know what Yaman meant. They only thought that the village chief's description was very interesting. Even if these things weren't friendly, why would children care about that? The village chief waved his hand. "Don't even think about it. Yaman, we don't have them in our village, but there are some outside. They specialize in eating children." The village chief made a fierce face, scaring the curious children. At that time, only little Muyu lowered his head, not daring to look at the village chief. And now, Muyu also lowered her head, not daring to look at the village chief who had just survived the disaster. Muyu had known that he had the ability to control trees since he was a child. However, the story of the village chief had given him a great shock. Moreover, he was an orphan. Therefore, he had never dared to reveal his ability. He was afraid that he would be regarded as a member of a Yumeng clan. Becoming an immortal master was the dream of many people, but not him. He was afraid of his ability and was afraid that people would look at him with disdain. "You Yaman, you're so bad. You're the Yaman. Your whole family are Yaman." When he was young, the children in the village would occasionally call each other Yaman when they quarreled. Yaman became an insulting term. Every time, Muyu would intentionally or unintentionally avoid this word. He didn't have parents since he was young, so he would occasionally wonder if he was really a Yaman. He would pull at his face, but he didn't remove any disguise. He was a person who could bleed, and his skin wasn't colorful. "I'm not a Yaman," Muyu said softly. He rarely used this ability. If it wasn't to save the village chief today, he wouldn't have rashly shown his ability in front of him. However, using this ability meant that the village chief already knew that he was related to Yaman, and he didn't know how to explain it. The village chief's face was uncertain. He wiped his sweat, and his heart was in turmoil. He took a step back, then took another step forward. He stopped and hesitated. Then he suddenly sighed. He walked over to pat Muyu on the head and said, "Silly child, of course you're not a Yaman. I watched you grow up. If you were a Yaman, then we would have been dead a long time ago, right?" Muyu suddenly raised his head and looked at the village chief in disbelief. This old man had often told them how evil the Yu Meng Devil Clan was and how much people hated them. The Yu Meng Devil Clan was the most ferocious species in the world. If they met the Yu Meng Devil Clan, they would fight to the death. But he believed him? "I don't know why I can control trees. It seems it's natural." Muyu didn't know, and very few people probably knew, that controlling trees was Yaman's ability. How could a human have that kind of ability? The village chief didn't know either. He was afraid of Yaman, but how could this child be a Yaman? Muyu ran around the village naked when he was young. If he was a Yaman, would this village be so peaceful? The village chief wasn't an ignorant person. On the contrary, he was knowledgeable, kind, and knew many things. Their village was just an ordinary village, so why would a Yaman hide in the village for so many years? The village chief thought of Muyu's mother. Perhaps this was the reason why Mu Yu's mother left him. Perhaps that woman already knew about Mu Yu's ability, so she chose to leave. Could it be that Mu Yu's father was a Yaman? The village chief denied his own thought. Yaman couldn't mate with humans. In many people's eyes, Yaman were emotionless. They only knew how to kill, and they lived to destroy the human world. Their power was mutually exclusive to humans, so it was impossible for a Yaman to produce offspring with a human. Mu Yu didn't have any Yaman's characteristics. His body was that of a normal child, and the village chief was sure of that. Maybe my father is from the Yaman devil clan. Mu Yu had such a thought because this matter itself was not normal. Who was his father? Who was his mother? Which parent would be so heartless to leave their child? The village chief sat down beside Mu Yu and said kindly, "Oh, I don't know either, but I'll teach you one last lesson. We can't decide our birth, but we can decide our life. The important thing isn't what power you have, but how you use it." But the village head paused for a moment, and his tone became very serious. "No matter what, you can't let others know about this ability. If this old man hadn't watched you grow up and understood your character, I wouldn't have trusted you so easily. But other people don't understand you, and they won't be as easy to talk to as me." Mu Yu's heart was warm. The village chief had always been a reasonable old man. This was one of the reasons Mu Yu respected him. The old man had taught him how to be a kind person since he was young. Even though Mu Yu always complained that he was too long-winded, he listened to most of his advice. The haze in Mu Yu's heart was swept away. He glanced at the village chief's pants, and there was a wet patch. He thought that the old man also had such an embarrassing side. "Grandpa village chief, you seen a pee in your pants? Nonsense. Why don't you try to fight with a big bear? Good Lord, if I didn't hold it back, you wouldn't have been able to deal with it so easily." The village chief stood up as if nothing had happened, and then began to look around. It seemed that he was going to find a place to wash up. Yes, you're the best." Mu Yu chuckled, and then he struggled to get up. He put his hand on a birch tree next to him, and the various plants in the forest gave him feedback. He then pointed in a direction and said, "Grandpa village chief, there's a small stream over there." The village chief looked suspiciously at Mu Yu, but he didn't ask any questions and quickly walked over. Mu Yu not only could control trees, but he could also merge with them. The trees could even become his eyes and ears, and he could use the trees to investigate the surrounding situation. He had never mentioned this to anyone before. Thinking about how the village chief trusted him, he felt that his previous worries were unnecessary. If he could, he would rather stay in the small mountain village and listen to the village chief tell him stories every day. Chapter 5. Although Mu Yu had been to a town before, he still felt a sense of novelty when he came here again. A town was different from a village. Although a village had more than 100 families, its prosperity could never be compared to a tenth of a town. The streets were bustling with people. Mu Yu and the village chief stood in the middle of the crowd. They looked exactly like country bumpkins. The village chief kept looking around. After he got older, he rarely came to town. He was looking for the location of the school. After confirming the location, he brought Mu Yu into the crowd. This school is jointly opened by the 4 big sections. It is specially used to select children who have the qualifications to become an immortal master. Every year, the school will send people to each village to test whether the 12-year-old children have the potential to become an immortal master. After that, they will all report to the school together. After that, the sects will come here to select people. If they're chosen by a big sect, then their life will be worth it. It is a pity that our village only has 2 people, including you, in the past 10 years. The village chief always felt that becoming an immortal master was a very sacred profession. Unfortunately, the requirements were too harsh. Not everyone had the potential to cultivate. Mu Yu thought back to the young man who came to the village a few days ago to test his bone structure. That young man was also a so-called immortal master. He was cold and arrogant, making others feel that they couldn't afford to offend him. Even after he tested that Mu Yu had the potential to cultivate, he remained indifferent. He only asked the village chief to send Mu Yu to the academy in town before leaving. That arrogant and lofty attitude of his made Muyu feel disgusted. After becoming an immortal master, will I become very cold? Muyu asked. The village chief thought about it and said, I don't know. Immortal masters are usually high and mighty. They naturally have nothing to say to us mortals. You will also become an immortal master in the future. At that time, won't you know? Muyu thought about the child who became an immortal master 10 years ago. He was already a young man now. When he came back last year, he was also full of pride and arrogance. Even the village chief had to listen to him respectfully. Muyu heard that immortal masters had to cut off the 7 emotions and 6 desires. He was not willing to become that kind of person. Oh, isn't this village chief Old Boo of Flowing Water Village? A deep voice came from behind Muyu and the others. This voice was full of energy, and Muyu had never heard it before. The village chief was stunned for a moment. His face was a little unhappy, but he still turned his head and forced a smile. He nodded and said, It's the Big Tiger Village's Big Tiger Village chief. What a coincidence. Not at all. I'm here to bring a few kids to the academy. What are you doing here, village chief Old Boo? In front of him was a burly man with a curly beard. Muyu felt that he was almost as big as the big grizzly bear they met in the morning. This was Daho, the village chief of Big Dot Village. Every year, at least 2 children in their village were tested to have the potential to cultivate, which made the people of other villages very envious. Village Chief Old Boo also often mentioned this matter. After all, Flowing Water Village only had 2 children every 10 years. The rate of becoming immortal was really not comparable to theirs. Our village also has a new kid today. I'm also bringing him to the school. The village chief tried his best to straighten his back and proudly put his hand on Muyu's shoulder. Oh, really? Our village has 4 this year. Dahu pulled the 4 very strong children behind him to the front and said arrogantly, There are 4 children in your village? The village chief was a little surprised. He felt that it was unfair. His village only had 1 kid every 10 years, but other people had at least 2 every year. This year, there were 4. This was too much. How do they cultivate these kids? Yes, we're lucky this year. We have 4 kids. The county chief was so happy that he exempted our village from taxes for half a year. Dahu said proudly. Village chief Old Boo was speechless. If there was a kid in the village who could become an immortal master, then even the county chief would take extra care of him. Every year, at least 2 children in Big Dot Village were selected by the major sects, which was also very valued by the county chief. The reduced taxes made many transactions more convenient. Now, Big Dot Village had become the richest village near Flowing Water Mountain. Oof. It's hard to say which sect he can enter. Our village's Muyu's aptitude is very good. He will definitely enter Song School. The village chief touched Muyu's head and said unhappily, That's not necessarily true. How can a major sect like Song School be so easy to enter? I see that your village's kid is so thin and weak. It would be good if he could enter a second-rate sect. There's no harm in telling you a secret. A few days ago, when the immortal master tested Little Tiger's root bone, he had a very surprised expression. At that time, he even told me to bring Little Tiger with me. What was the immortal master's expression when your kid was tested? Goodbye. Daho looked at the thin and small Muyu with ridicule. Little Tiger was next to Daho. Little Tiger looked at Muyu with arrogance. He didn't put Muyu in his eyes at all. Big Tiger mocked village chief Old Boo again, then left with the 4 strong children in big strides. Village chief looked at their departing figures with an ugly expression. Being looked down upon by them made him furious. He thought about it and remembered that the immortal master was expressionless at that time and didn't even bother to say a word. Muyu, you have to work hard. You must enter one of those first-rate sections. Let's see if he can still be so arrogant. The village chief's mustache rose and fell as he looked at Muyu with hope. Muyu nodded helplessly. He knew that there were 4 major sects in the school. They were the Song School, the Jihua School, the Yin Mountain Sect, and the Wuwen School. As long as one could enter one of these 4 sects, it would be equivalent to bringing honor to one's ancestors. Not to mention being chosen by the head of the 4 major sects, the Qing Song School. No one knew how they selected their disciples. According to the village chief, every year, all the children with cultivation talent would be sent to the school. Then each sect would send someone to select their favorite disciple. As for how they chose, the village chief didn't know. He said that it might be because the child was pleasing to the eye. At that time, Mu Yu's talent didn't attract the immortal master's attention. Therefore, he knew that he wouldn't be any better. However, entering a second-rate sect was still not bad. If he performed well, he might be able to enter a first-rate sect. Mu Yu didn't like Dahu's proud face. He also hoped that he would be chosen by a first-rate sect. At that time, he would be able to enjoy Dahu's shocked and jealous expression. Village chief, Old Bu, and Mu Yu were shuttling through the endless stream of people. The sound of hawking on the street rose and fell one after another. Finally, the two of them stopped in front of a magnificent red house. Mu Yu had never seen such a magnificent house. Precious black robe, wood carvings of dragons and phoenixes were built into two magnificent pillars. At the entrance, there was a lifelike dragon carved out of stone. It was painted blue. Its two bell-like eyes were majestic and lifelike. It seemed to be able to scare away all evildoers, making people not dare to look at it directly. The vermilion-red door was open. It was solemn and had a bit of floating dust. It was completely different from the surrounding architectural style. At the door sat two young people wearing blue robes. Their attire was completely different from ordinary people. They were obviously immortal masters. They just sat there calmly with their eyes closed. Presumably, ordinary people wouldn't dare to disturb them. Chapter 6. Mu Yu had never thought that there would be so many people here. There was a hubbub of voices and people pushing each other. There were white-haired old men, hunters in animal skins, villagers in sackcloth, beautiful young girls and graceful women, middle-aged men dressed like scholars. There were all kinds of people. The only similarity was that every adult had a child who was about the same age as Mu Yu. It seemed that they were all here to send their children to the school. Some of the children's aunts and uncles seemed to have come. They surrounded their children and kept talking about something with a proud expression on their faces. Presumably, it was something worth celebrating that there was someone in their family who could become an immortal master. Look, an immortal master who can fly. Oh my God, so awesome. My little fatty can also fly in the sky and burrow into the ground in the future, right? At this moment, there was a commotion in the crowd. Many people couldn't help but look up at the sky. 3 people stepped on flying swords and flew over. There were 2 men and 1 woman. The leading young man was gentle and elegant. His clothes were whiter than snow, and there was a golden ribbon around his waist that moved with the wind. The flying sword under his feet was silver, and it looked incomparably noble under the sunlight. This man was very handsome. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was a dragon among men. With a smile on his face, people couldn't help but feel close to him. Next to him was a woman in purple. Her clothes were fluttering like dust. Her skin was as smooth as cream, like a lotus flower rising out of the water. She was fresh and beautiful, like a fairy from heaven. The other man was wearing gray clothes and holding a black bamboo folding fan. His movements revealed a kind of otherworldly aura. The appearance of these 3 people made many people excited. Even the 2 young men sitting at the door opened their eyes and stood up. The 3 people slowly landed at the door. The flying swords under their feet had already disappeared. The 2 young men at the door cupped their hands and greeted the 3 people. The 3 people didn't lose their manners and greeted them back. Senior Brother Bai, almost all the other sects have arrived. You are in charge of the school selection. Please go in quickly. The man in green clothes said respectfully. Obviously, the 3 people who came had a much higher status than him. Sorry to keep you waiting. The young man in white clothes nodded gently and then stepped into the school gate with the other 2 people. I know this person. This young man in white is a top student of Qing Song School. He has extraordinary talent and is the leader of the younger generation. That girl in purple is probably the apple of the eye of the headmaster of Qing Song School, isn't she? Yes. The fact that Song School could be ranked first among the 4 major schools shows how powerful they are. The crowd was discussing animatedly. They were all talking about the famous sect, the Pine Tree sect. The headmaster of Song School, Taoist Song, had an unfathomable cultivation level. He was recognized as the most powerful immortal master, and the other sect had no choice but to respect him. Everyone hoped that their children could enter Song School. It was definitely a great honor. It was not an exaggeration to say that it would bring honor to their ancestors. Muyu, this old man hopes that you can enter Song School. If you can't, at least enter a slightly better school. You have to perform well. The village head looked at the 3 young people walking into the school with awe. Only then did he instruct Muyu earnestly and help Muyu tidy up his clothes. Muyu blinked his eyes. What kind of performance did he have to perform to be noticed by her? Who knew how they chose their disciples? However, looking at the village head's eager expression, Muyu could only nod firmly. He had to show the old man his determination first. As for whether the old man wanted him or not, that was another matter. Everyone, please be quiet. Now, let the children who meet the requirements come over. They only need to touch this stone. Adults, stay where you are. You're not allowed to cross this line. The young man casually drew a red line on the ground. Although his voice was low, it clearly reached everyone's ears. Everyone quieted down. They did not dare to offend the immortal master's dignity. Can I go in just like this? Muyu looked at the white stone on the table next to the young man. He recognized this stone. A few days ago, the cold and arrogant immortal master used this stone to test the children in the village. When he put his hand on it, the white stone lit up. It must be used to screen and determine whether the children had the potential to cultivate. Some people couldn't wait to squeeze forward, afraid that they would be left alone. However, no one dared to be presumptuous in front of the immortal master. They all lined up obediently. Many children put their hands on the stone, and the stone would light up. Then, the young man would let them go in. You're not qualified. Go back. The young man stopped a nervous child. The child stammered, not knowing what to do. He just put his hand on the stone, and the stone did not change. Obviously, he did not have the potential to cultivate, but he wanted to fish in troubled waters and run in. I repeat, don't take any chances. If your child has the potential to cultivate, then he does. If he doesn't, then he doesn't. Don't waste our time. Otherwise, I won't be polite. The young man said sternly. His voice seemed to have a special penetrating power, making people feel awe. Naturally, many parents were envious that their children could become immortal cultivators. Even though their children had long been tested to have no cultivation aptitude, they still came here to try their luck. What if there was something wrong with the stone during the first test? Maybe a miracle would happen if they tried again. Many people were unwilling, but the immortal master's methods were quite clever. Even if they were unwilling, it was useless. When a young man shouted, many people couldn't help but take a step back. It seemed that it was not a good thing to provoke the immortal master. Originally, the immortal master would go to each village for the test to prevent many unqualified children from crowding in front of the school. It could be considered as the first round of screening, and this was only a confirmation. It could save a lot of effort. The young man stared at the child. How could a child have seen the world? Coupled with the majesty of the immortal master, the child's face flushed red and his eyes filled with tears. Then, he couldn't hold it in anymore and burst into tears. He quickly ran to his parents. His parents' faces were also gloomy as they hurriedly took their child and left. Most of the children went in through the induction of the white stone in front, leaving many parents who were looking forward to it. The village chief touched Muyu's head reluctantly and said, "Go. Be good and remember, don't let others know that you have that ability." The village chief whispered the last sentence in Muyu's ear. Muyu felt sad. His departure meant that he might not be able to see the village chief for a long time. He felt quite sad. Muyu hugged the village chief, then squeezed through the crowd and walked forward. I wonder what will happen after I become an immortal master. Muyu thought of the immortal master in the village. He went there 10 years ago and came back last year. When he came back, he was a different person. His parents almost didn't recognize him. Chapter 7. In reality, there were very few children who could cultivate. Although there was a large crowd at the entrance, most of them were accompanied by the children's relatives. After all, this was a major event that could change a child's life, so they couldn't be careless. There were about 400 to 500 children who had the potential to cultivate. Muyu was currently standing in a large courtyard. There were few trees around him, but there were no other adults. Only a middle-aged immortal master was there to maintain order among the children. Although the children were mischievous, everyone seemed to be slightly nervous in this kind of situation. Especially in the immortal master's territory, everyone was well-behaved and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. How would they decide which sect they would go to? If no sect wanted him, then should he be sent home? This was everyone's question, including Muyu. If no sect wanted them, it would be too shameful for them to be sent back. Muyu could even see the disappointed look on the village head's face. The village head said that the selection might be based on who was pleasing to the eye. Muyu quickly tidied up his clothes and smoothed out his messy hair. This was very difficult because Muyu didn't have parents to help him dress up like the other children. He didn't even wash his hair, not to mention that he was chased by a big grizzly bear just now. His whole body was dirty. He was a little regretful. When a village head was washing his pants by the stream, he should have also washed himself. I heard that we will be fighting with the beasts later. Whoever performs better will be chosen by the immortal master. A chubby little boy saw that the middle-aged immortal master had left, and he solemnly said, This can't be right. How can we beat the wild beasts? A skinny boy who looked malnourished bitterly swung his arms and found that he didn't have enough strength. My brother said that the test later will be very harmful. If we're not careful, we will become idiots. A little girl with 2 braids said timidly. Her left index finger pulled on her right index finger tightly, appearing very nervous. That's because your brother is jealous that you can cultivate and he can't. The little fatty said disdainfully. They're going to test whether or not we know immortal spells later. You bunch of country bumpkins. A well-dressed boy glanced at this group of people. He came from a wealthy family. As a rich young master, he was proud and arrogant. Naturally, he looked down on these people from the countryside. Little Fatty was unhappy. He asked, How can we know any immortal spells? Don't tell me you know how to do it. The young master snorted and said, Of course I do. You bunch of country bumpkins, look carefully. My teacher is a powerful immortal master. He taught me specially. You have an immortal master as your teacher? Good heavens! Your father is too amazing. Many people felt that this was inconceivable. They immediately made space for the young master. They all wanted to see how the young master used the immortal technique. The young master listened to the exclamations of the others and enjoyed it very much. He proudly shook his wrists and then clasped his hands together. His index fingers stretched out and touched each other as he muttered something. At the same time, he shook his head as if he was thinking about something. What are you blabbering about? Little Fatty still did not believe him. Country bumpkin, don't you know that immortal masters have to chant incantations to use immortal techniques? Don't affect me. After the young master finished speaking, he changed his posture. He half squatted and raised his butt high. This time, he even raised his voice so that everyone could hear him clearly. Lord Laozi's command is as fast as the law. Wind, fire, thunder, lightning, follow my command. It sounded like it was the real deal. This well-rehearsed command frightened some of the children. Some of them even looked at the young master in awe, their hearts filled with worship. Isn't this the incantation that the old woman next door who dances around chants every day? Don't tell me that your teacher is also someone who dances around. Little Fatty muttered. Muyu held back his laughter. He had also heard of these 2 commands. Last time, when a village heard that there was a ghost, they specially invited a mage to perform a ritual. That immortal master also chanted these 2 commands. At that time, he sprinkled water and spat fire, scaring the villagers. The young master ignored little Fatty. His face was flushed red. His 2 index fingers were tightly pressed together, and then he pointed to the ground. After a while, his hand moved forward. There was only a light poochy sound. Something between the young master's index fingers streaked across the air, creating a gust of air that sprayed on the ground. The dust on the ground was blown away, leaving behind a shallow mark. Wow, so powerful. How did you do it? Many people opened their eyes wide. Although this mark was at most a fingernail-sized hole, and the ground was soft sand, but after all, it appeared out of thin air. Naturally, many people were extremely shocked. The way they looked at the young master changed. Oof. I already said that this is a very powerful immortal technique. You guys still have a long time to learn it. My teacher is an expert, the young master said proudly. Muyu also felt a little surprised. Why did his fingers spray out a gust of air? Where did this gust of air come from? Could it be that his teacher was really an expert? If they were going to test the immortal technique later, then wouldn't only the young master be able to pass? Many people began to imitate the young master's gestures. When the young master said that he was going to test the immortal technique, they believed 70% to 80%. Some people even began to panic. Little Fatty curled his lips and said, unconvinced, "Isn't it just a fart with a finger? What's so great about it?" However, his actions still betrayed him. He also walked to the side and secretly imitated the young master. He tried to see if he could also release a gust of air from his finger. Soon, the courtyard was filled with scattered murmurs. Taishang Laojun is hurried, 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 hurried. No, no, hurried, hurried. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth. No, no, wind, fire, thunder, lightning, earth. How do you say it? Children had rich imaginations. Everyone was chanting the so-called incantation. Some people didn't hear it clearly and made it up. Muyu even heard some of the incantation, open sesame. He didn't know what it meant. Why was it open sesame and not open sesame? Muyu didn't like to eat sesame. Looking at everyone's nervous expressions, Muyu felt relieved. After all, he wasn't the only one here who didn't know the so-called immortal technique. Many people didn't know it. If it was a test of immortal technique, then a large number of people would fail. Therefore, it must be another test, and not the one the young master said. What are you all doing? All of you, stand properly. At this time, the middle-aged immortal master came back from somewhere. He saw a group of children doing the same strange actions and chanting. He frowned and scolded them loudly. He thought to himself, children are indeed children. They can't change their mischievous nature. Everyone quickly stopped in embarrassment and quickly lined up to listen to the immortal master's lecture. When the middle-aged immortal master saw that everyone was standing properly, he said, "The test is next. Follow me. Don't push. Follow the order." The middle-aged immortal master turned and walked to the other side of the courtyard. There was an arched door. The middle-aged immortal master pushed the door open and the others followed in. They came to another spacious place. This place was very spacious. There was an empty space in the middle. There were circular stairs around the empty space. There were seats on each of the stairs. At this moment, dozens of people were sitting there. They were majestically scanning the children who walked into the empty space. There were old and young people among these people. Some of them had gorgeous appearances and were dressed in bright clothes, while others were dressed in plain clothes. They looked like real experts, but no matter who they were, the aura they exuded was enough to shock these ignorant children. After all, these people were high and mighty immortal masters. No one had ever seen so many immortal masters. These immortal masters sat there and glanced at the children. The faint pressure made many of the children's hearts palpitate. Was this the power of immortal masters? Everyone was faintly excited. After all, if everything went smoothly, they would become one of these immortal masters. The immortal masters also began to whisper to each other. They would occasionally point at each other. It was clear that they were talking about the aptitude of this year's disciples. Did they see who was special? Muyu thought to himself. He hoped that one of the immortal masters would be able to look at him for a while. Now, the test is about to start. Follow the line I just arranged for you. Walk up to the stage one by one. Someone will tell you what to do. The middle-aged immortal master said with a straight face. Everyone looked at the place the middle-aged immortal master pointed at. It was located in the center of the empty space. It was like a stage. The only difference was that there was a huge stone placed on the stage. There was a table next to it. A white-haired old man was sitting at the table. There were signs on the table, but no one knew what they were for. Chapter 8. At this time, a handsome figure floated out from the audience and gracefully landed on the stage. His body was as light as a feather, causing many children to be fascinated by him. This person was the Qing Song School's top disciple, Baliang. Baliang's appearance caused the whispering immortal masters to quiet down. After all, he was the head disciple of the Qing Song School, the leader of the 4 great sections. His cultivation was also outstanding. In this time, he represented the Qing Song Taoists to preside over the selection of disciples. No one dared to underestimate him. Even a white-haired old man sitting next to the table stood up and respectfully stood to the side. Greetings, fellow Taoists and seniors. Recently, my master had an epiphany and is in seclusion. He specifically instructed me to preside over the selection of disciples. If there are any inadequacies, please forgive me. Baliang cupped his hands towards the other immortal masters and said, "Don't mention it. Nephew Bai, please do as you please." The Qing Song Taoist is a person of virtue and prestige, so his disciple must be extraordinary as well. A bald middle-aged man lightly said, "Nephew is too polite." The Qing Song Taoist seclusion seems to have improved his cultivation. This is truly worthy of celebration. A red-faced old man from the audience said, "Thank you, senior." Then, this junior will announce the official start of today's selection. Fellow Taoists, please use your wisdom to find your favorite disciple. Baliang bowed towards the red-faced old man. It was clear that this red-faced old man's identity was not ordinary. Baliang straightened his body and then slowly said, "The Academy's disciple test that is held once a year officially begins now. According to the rules of the previous years, the Stone Spirit Mountain's quota will determine who will be the first to pick a disciple. Last year's first place went to our Qing Song School. Today, Qing Song School will be the first to choose 5 disciples, followed by Jihua School, Unwind School, Yan Mountain Sect. Every school will first choose 5 disciples, and each school can only choose 2 disciples of the same level. The rest of the disciples can be freely chosen." Baliang began to recite the names of a large number of schools. In total, there were about 20 schools. The names of these schools were all different. Muyu couldn't remember so many schools. He only remembered the first 4 schools. Perhaps the one that left the deepest impression on him was Qing Song School. If he could become Baliang's junior brother, it would be a very good thing. The last one is the Falling Dust Sect. Only the weakest will be ranked last. I definitely cannot enter the Falling Dust Sect, otherwise it would be so embarrassing. Little Fatty clenched his fists and said, everyone knew that the last ranked school was definitely the weakest. Even if they entered, they wouldn't have any future prospects. However, many people believed that the Falling Dust Sect was still a fortuitous opportunity. At the very least, they could cultivate. If no one wanted them, then it would be the most embarrassing. When Baliang read out the names of the schools, some people snorted. Over the years, the most powerful school, Qing Song School, would be the first to pick disciples. They would pick all the disciples with good aptitudes, and then the rest of the disciples with average aptitudes would be distributed among the other schools. The 4 great schools would be able to get suitable disciples, and the remaining schools could only pick some disciples with mediocre aptitudes. Needless to say, the last place was the leftover from everyone's selection. If this continued, the schools would never be able to develop. However, this was something that couldn't be helped. This school was originally established by the 4 great sections. In order to recruit better disciples, the other schools couldn't say anything even if they had complaints. This was because no one dared to challenge the prestige of the 4 great sections. Not to mention, the number 1 sect, the Qing Song Taoist, had an unfathomable cultivation base. How could an ordinary sect offend him? In the cultivation world, the best age to cultivate was 12 years old. Even if a test was conducted before the age of 12, it would be very difficult to truly test a child's aptitude. Therefore, it was impossible for many sects to find disciples with good aptitudes. Unless every sect was willing to spend a lot of effort to go to various villages and towns every year to find 12-year-old children, this would take a lot of time. Moreover, they might not be able to find a suitable one. If they specifically sent people to find disciples with good aptitudes, it would delay this person's cultivation. No one was willing to do such a thankless task. In addition, there were very few people who could cultivate. Therefore, those sects without strength could only choose to recruit disciples from the schools established by the 4 great sections. This made people feel quite helpless. Although each disciple's aptitude was different, it didn't mean that you would definitely become a powerful immortal master after entering a good sect. It could only be said that your starting point was relatively high. The hard work of the day after tomorrow would determine everything. Often, there would be people with amazing talents in small sections. This was hard to say. As long as you could cultivate diligently, it didn't matter which sect you entered. It was just that the competition in the big sects was greater and it could stimulate people's motivation. Next, Deacon Sun, you may begin. Bai Liang nodded slightly to the white-haired old man next to him. Yes, young master. The white-haired old man said respectfully. Deacon Sun was the manager of the school. Although the manager of the school had a lot of power, he was still very humble in front of Bai Liang. After all, Bai Liang was like a bright star. Naturally, his status was self-evident. Bai Liang returned to his seat. Deacon Sun turned around and gestured to the middle-aged immortal master. The middle-aged immortal master nodded, then turned to the group of children and said, "Now, you may go up one by one. Then, put your hand on the stone and push it." Push the stone? Muyu breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out that they didn't have to fight with wild beasts, nor did they have to use any immortal spells. They only had to push the stone. Fortunately, everyone had heard rumors and was so nervous about the test. Little Fatty said angrily, "I'm going to go back and beat up Ergo." It was obviously just pushing the stone, but he said it was fighting with wild beasts. He scared me to death. The others also breathed a sigh of relief. However, another question emerged. This stone was bigger than an adult. Could a group of 12-year-old children really push it? What if they couldn't push it? Did it mean that they didn't pass? Although it's not fighting with wild beasts, why do I feel that this test is not fair at all for the skinny boy? The skinny boy swung his arms in frustration again. He felt that he had a higher chance of winning if he fought with wild beasts. After all, he was flexible. He might even be able to exhaust the wild beasts to death. It's actually not a test of immortal spells. The young master was also very disappointed. He had imagined that he would be able to shine in front of those immortal masters after learning this skill. Muyu also felt that it was a little strange. How did pushing a stone test whose aptitude was better? Could it be that it depended on whose strength was greater? However, since they were testing like this, they must have their own reasons. Let's see how it goes first. The first child was a little girl. She was very thin and weak. The stone was 3 to 4 times her size. Could she really push it? The little girl's heart was beating like a drum. She walked up nervously and tripped on the steps. However, no other children laughed at her because they also wouldn't think it was easy. Don't be nervous. Press your hands on the stone. Then you'll understand what to do. It's very simple. Deacon Sun smiled and said to the little girl. The little girl blinked her big eyes. Obviously, she didn't quite believe Deacon Sun's so-called simple word. She was so nervous that she was about to cry. The little girl composed herself and took a deep breath. Then, she stretched out her hands and pressed them on the stone. However, the expected strenuous expression didn't appear on the little girl's face. On the contrary, she looked a little surprised. Then, she frowned and closed her eyes. Those who knew the inside story looked at the little girl seriously, while those who didn't know stretched their necks and stared with wide eyes. No one knew why the little girl had such a reaction. Could it be that she could push the stone without using any strength? At this moment, the ugly gray stone suddenly turned green. That green stone made many immortal masters stare. Then, their gazes became fiery. The way they looked at the little girl was obviously not right. There was admiration and envy. The little girl opened her eyes and felt as if she was surrounded by many gazes. She was a little flustered. When she found that the stone in front of her didn't show any signs of moving, her face turned pale and she looked very uneasy. Little girl, don't worry. You passed the test. Take this plate and stand over there. Deacon Sun smiled and handed a green plate to the little girl. When the little girl heard that she had passed the test, she was overjoyed. She quickly took the plate and ran towards the place Deacon Sun pointed to. It was that simple. Many children were a little surprised. The so-called pushing the stone was just putting your hands on it, even if the stone didn't move an inch. Next, another child went up. However, when his hands touched the stone, the gray stone only showed an orange color. It was different from the color of the first little girl. Deacon Sun also gave him an orange plate. But that's simple. I thought I had to push the stone to pass. The skinny boy swung his arms again. This was much easier than pushing the stone and fighting with the wild beasts. Muyu watched the few people in front of him go up. Their test results were different. The color of the stone was also different. Most of them were red. Occasionally, there would be a yellow stone, which made many immortal masters turn their heads. As for the first little girl's green stone, it was needless to say. Muyu suddenly understood. This stone should be displayed according to the colors of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, purple. According to the situation of the few people in front of him, red was considered ordinary and green was considered high quality. However, he hadn't seen any color above green yet. There were 4 or 5 children whose stone didn't change color at all. It was still an ugly gray. Deacon Sun simply handed the gray token to them and didn't say anything else. Hey, you're the kid from the seedless village, right? At this moment, 4 children from the Big Dot village suddenly walked in front of Muyu and asked with contempt. They looked at Muyu as if they were looking at a ridiculous good-for-nothing. Their tone was full of disdain. Muyu naturally recognized them. Just now, on the street, their village chief, Dahu, was proudly showing off to his village chief, Old Boo. Old Boo didn't have a good impression of the people from the Big Dot village. Muyu also didn't have a good impression of the people from the Big Dot village. Chapter 9. Of course I know you're from Flowing Water Village, but your village only produces 2 people who can cultivate every 10 years. If this isn't cowardice, then what is? Xiaohu mocked. Xiaohu is naturally Dahu's son. Dahu looked down on Flowing Water Village, so Xiaohu also looked down on Flowing Water Village. The number of people doesn't mean anything. The most important thing is which sect you can enter, isn't it? Muyu calmly said. He didn't like this arrogant and despotic guy. He wanted to find an opportunity to dampen this guy's spirit. Listening to your cowardly tone, are you planning to enter a big sect like Qingsong School? Ha! A toad lusting after a swan's meat. Dahu and the other 3 people laughed. At this moment, they were all standing at the back of the line, so the middle-aged immortal master in charge of maintaining order didn't notice them. This was why they dared to laugh at Muyu without restraint. Muyu smiled faintly. He didn't want to argue with these people. Whether or not he could enter a sect was not something that could be decided by a few words of ridicule. The test hadn't been conducted yet, so no one could say what the result would be. Last time, the immortal master who tested my root bone specifically told me to come. He personally said that I was a good material for cultivation. I don't know what your immortal master said about you. Dahu proudly said. Muyu was silent. In fact, he had thought about it. It was best if he didn't enter Qingsong School. Qingsong School's Qingsong Taoist had an unfathomable cultivation. If he found out that Muyu could control trees, then he would be in danger. The village chief had repeatedly told him not to let others know about Muyu's ability to control plants. The immortal master and Yumon were sworn enemies. If the immortal master knew that Muyu had Yumon's ability, then there would be trouble. It's hard to say. Muyu shook his head slightly. He ignored the 4 people and turned his attention back to the person on the stage. The stone on the stage was now yellow. The little boy was once again the center of attention. Muyu clenched his fist. What color would his test be? Soon, the line became shorter and shorter. It was already Dahu and the other's turn. Little Tiger smiled contemptuously at Muyu, then walked up and placed his hand on the rock. Green. It was actually green. Green and cyan were different. Cyan radiance was between green and blue. Obviously, it was of a higher gray than green. The moment the green light appeared on the stage, many immortal masters stood up and stared at Little Tiger with fervent gazes. Even Taoist Pine Tree's disciple, Bai Lang, was moved. Deacon Sun's mouth was also agape. For a moment, he actually forgot to pass the token to Xiao. It's actually green. Oh my god. The middle-aged, immortal master murmured. I remember that the last time a green talent appeared was Young Master by Liang from Qingsong School. This boy will definitely become a god's favored son, like Young Master by Liang. Alas, I should have flattered him. The middle-aged immortal master's face showed a trace of regret. Little Tiger was not a fool. He knew that his talent was definitely top-notch when he saw the reactions of the surrounding immortal masters. He glanced at Muyu proudly and made a provocative gesture at Muyu. Then, he said impatiently, "Hey, old man, where's my token?" Sorry. This is yours." Only then did Deacon Sun react. He was not even angry at Little Tiger's rudeness. Instead, he handed the green token to Little Tiger with a face full of smiles. Even the way he addressed Little Tiger was yours. This showed how much he valued Little Tiger's talent. If nothing unexpected happened, there would be another genius like Bai Liang. At that time, Little Tiger's casual words would be in order to Deacon Sun. Why would he care about Little Tiger's rudeness? Is Bai Liang's talent also green? Muyu's heart was somewhat shaken. Sure enough, Little Tiger did not lie. His talent was indeed very good. It was actually at the same level as Bai Liang's talent. It seemed that Little Tiger would definitely enter Qingsong School. There was no doubt about it. The cyan light lingered on the stone for a long time before gradually dissipating. Muyu noticed that the stone's light dissipated in about 10 breaths of time. For example, the red and orange stones would only display light for 10 breaths of time before dissipating. As for the yellow and green stones, they would stay for a bit longer. This cyan light stayed for nearly a quarter of an hour, causing the test to be interrupted for a period of time. Soon, 3 other people from the Big Dot village also passed the test. 2 of them were orange, and the other one was yellow. Their talent was also above average. The people from the Big Dot village were indeed powerful. Those who could cultivate were also extraordinary. Muyu looked at the people who had passed the test. They were all standing according to their assigned colors. Little Tiger stood alone in one place. Obviously, he was the only one with a green result. There were about 10 people with green tokens. There were about 20 people with yellow tokens. There were about 50 people with orange tokens. There were about 80 to 90 people with red tokens. There were about 30 people without any color. Little Skinny, who had the most concerns, was green. Little Young Master and Little Fatty were yellow. Finally, it was Muyu's turn. Muyu took a deep breath and slowly walked up. He saw that Little Tiger had begun to mock him again. Muyu ignored him and focused his attention on the gray stone in front of him. Begin. Remember, don't resist what will happen later. Deacon Sun nodded. Before each person took the test, Deacon Sun's expression was always amiable. This was because he didn't know who would amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. If he left a bad impression on geniuses like Little Tiger, it would obviously not be good. Muyu placed his hand on the gray stone and closed his eyes. A strange warm current flowed from his palm. The warm current came from this inconspicuous stone. The warm current gently flowed through Muyu's body, as if it was searching for something. Muyu didn't resist. He just let the warm current flow through his body. At the same time, he felt very comfortable, as if he was soaking in a hot spring. All the pores on his body seemed to have expanded. Muyu's body seemed to be filled with energy. He wanted to release all the energy in his body. The warm current flowed. At first, it was very slow and there were no abnormalities. Gradually, the warm current began to flow to Muyu's lower abdomen, the place called Dantian. Then, as if the warm current had found something in Muyu, it became somewhat hurried. Then, Muyu found that his body had lost control. It was as if the warm current had taken away the control of his body. However, his senses became incomparably sharp. He could feel the grass on the ground around him moving rhythmically. Some of the grass buds even had signs of blooming. Some of the grass seeds even began to sprout green buds in the crevices of the stones, about to begin their new life. The flourishing scene made Muyu's body and mind very happy. He wanted to let all the plants grow vigorously under his guidance, absorbing the rain, dew, and sunlight, interpreting the most beautiful life. As long as he was willing, he could turn the surroundings into a grassland full of vitality. No, you can't grow. Muyu suddenly remembered the village chief's instructions. If a lot of grass appeared here, then there would definitely be people who would be suspicious. At that time, his ability to control plants would be known by others. If they mistook him for the Woodyaman, then it would be bad. There were immortal masters everywhere. Any changes in the surroundings would definitely not escape their eyes. He had to take back control of his body and stop the grass from growing. Muyu's heart calmed down. He began to resist the warm current. The warm current clearly did not want to retreat. It had not completed its mission and was still entangled in Muyu's dantian. However, Muyu's willpower was very firm. He could not expose his ability. Otherwise, he would definitely attract a fatal disaster. He forced the warm current away from his arm. Gradually, he felt that he could move his hand. He immediately retracted his hand and opened his eyes while panting. Fighting against the warm current took a lot of effort. He felt as if he was about to collapse. Even his clothes were soaked in sweat. Then, he noticed the color of the stones in front of him. Gray. The stones did not change at all. They were still an ugly gray color. Because Muyu broke off contact with the stones, the warm current disappeared like snow. It was as if it had never existed. Gray token. Take it and stand over there. Deacon Sun handed a gray token to Muyu. Then, he signaled Muyu to walk to the side. Muyu clenched his teeth. Gray? He took the gray token and suddenly felt very guilty. Needless to say, he knew how bad his test results were. A gray test result meant that he would only be able to stay in a third-rate sect. Even if the sect didn't want him, it would be a problem. He thought of the village chief. If the old man saw this scene, he would definitely be very disappointed, right? Fortunately, no one gave Muyu a second glance. The rhythmic grass also returned to tranquility. No one cared about the grass abnormality. Muyu felt very uncomfortable. He knew that if he did not withdraw his hand at the last moment, the result would not only be gray. He felt that the power in his body was very majestic. At the very least, it should be yellow. But now it was too late. The test results were already set. Even if he were to take the test again, the result would be the same. If the village chief knew that he gave up the test because he could not expose Yaman's ability, he should understand, right? Muyu saw Little Tiger laughing proudly. This time, he couldn't shut Little Tiger up. He really wanted to give this guy a punch, but he knew that if he really did it, many immortal masters would immediately kill him. After all, everyone would stand on the latter's side when comparing a low-ranked immortal with a tomorrow's genius. Behind Muyu, there were still more than 20 people who had also passed the test. Muyu didn't care about the results of the test, nor did he have the mood to care about it. Right now, he only hoped that he would be chosen by some sect and successfully enter that sect. He didn't want to disappoint the village chief. Chapter 10. The selection of disciples was divided into 2 rounds. In the first round, each sect would pick 5 disciples. In order to show fairness, each sect could only pick 2 disciples of each talent level. This was to prevent all the disciples with potential from being picked by the top few disciples. The Green Pine sect was the first to choose. Naturally, they chose Little Tiger, who was the only one with a blue talent level. They also chose 2 children with the green talent level and 2 children with the yellow talent level. When they picked Little Tiger, the other 3 sects had ugly expressions on their faces. Obviously, they had never gotten a Cyan talent level disciple before. However, the Qingsong Taoist cultivation level was there, so no one dared to say anything. Moreover, this selection method was agreed upon by everyone. The selection order was also decided by the annual competition, so no one had any objections. The 4 sects had all picked suitable disciples, but the other sects were not so lucky. The speed of selection was very fast because during the testing process, many of the elders had already determined their target disciples. Moreover, they had estimated that the probability of them choosing those disciples was higher. Thus, they did not hesitate in the slightest when choosing. Even so, there were still some white-bearded Taoists who carefully felt the muscles and bones of each disciple before deciding whether to pick them or not. These children were like goods in the market, allowing people to pick and choose. However, no one had any complaints when they were chosen. On the contrary, they were very happy. Because the red talent level disciples were the most common, there was no limit to the number of people who could be selected. In the end, Muyu found a very awkward situation. After one round of selection, none of the gray talent disciples were selected. Muyu knew that according to this selection method, the gray talent disciples would not be selected even in the second round. Even in the end, they would not be selected. Then what would happen to the gray talent disciples? Would they be directly sent back? If he was sent back, Muyu didn't even dare to imagine the disappointed look on the village head's face. Although he didn't want to cultivate, he was still a representative of the flowing water village. If he wasn't selected, he was afraid that the village head wouldn't be able to raise his head in the future. The second round of selection was also over, and all the disciples had been selected. Only about 30 or so disciples with gray talent level were left unattended. These children already knew what kind of situation they were in. Everyone's expression was very disappointed, and some of the children were even secretly wiping away tears. Thinking back to the time when he was tested to have the potential to cultivate, his family was so happy. His 7 aunts and 8 aunts fought to be the first to send him off, but he ended up like this. That kind of difference was something that even an adult would not be able to bear, let alone these innocent children. Even the Luochin school, which was the last place, did not choose them. Muyu did not know which immortal masters were from the Luochin school, but presumably the disciples they selected were at least of the red talent level. Even the third-rate schools did not want these gray talent disciples. It could be imagined how important talent was in the cultivation world. Every sect had gradually left with the new disciples they had chosen. Only this group of unwanted children were still standing there at a loss. The last glimmer of hope in everyone's heart had been shattered. Many children were crying sadly. When Muyu saw a little girl crying, he sighed in his heart. He wanted to comfort her, but then he thought about it. What qualifications did he have to comfort her? When most of the immortal masters had left, the white-haired deacon Sun slowly walked over. He glanced at these unwanted children and shook his head helplessly. Everyone don't cry. The cultivation world has cruel rules. Talent determines everything. Don't be sad. Now, there are 2 paths in front of you. One is to go home directly and be immortal in peace. Live your own life quietly, get married, have children, or pass the imperial examinations. In the future, you can also have a career. The other is to stay in the school and become a reserve disciple. What's a reserve disciple? Some children asked while sobbing. A strange look flashed in Deacon Sun's eyes, but it quickly disappeared. He squeezed out a smile. A reserve disciple is to stay in the school. Although your talent is a little low, it's not like you don't have the ability to cultivate. Your progress is slow, but as long as you cultivate diligently, there's still a chance that you'll be chosen by the immortal masters of those schools. When the other children heard that they could stay and had a chance to be chosen by the school, they immediately stopped crying. As long as there was a trace of a chance, no one was willing to leave. They would rather fight for it. However, Muyu's thoughts weren't so simple. He knew that being a reserve disciple wouldn't be easy. At the very least, they would have to pay a price. Deacon Sun continued, "You'll stay in the school and work for the school. If disciples from other schools come here, you must receive them well. Then, when you grow up, you'll have to go to various villages and towns every year to find children who are 12 years old and bring them here. If you do a good job, you'll be rewarded with spirit stones. Spirit stones are the currency of the cultivation world, and they're also used for cultivation. You'll know in the future. Now, you can make your own choice. Leave or stay." Many children scrambled to say that they wanted to stay. No one was willing to leave with regrets. What if they really had a chance to become an immortal master in the future? Only Muyu didn't say anything. He understood what a reserve disciple was. It must be a servant of the school that was specially used by other schools. However, Muyu also didn't want to leave. He didn't want to see the village chief's disappointed expression. Deacon Sun had already expected that no children would choose to leave, so he didn't explain anything. He just said, "Since everyone has chosen to stay, then follow me. I'll arrange a place for you to stay first. From tomorrow onwards, I'll arrange daily tasks for you." Everyone took the initiative to follow behind Deacon Sun. No one cried anymore. They walked with joy or determination. Only Muyu sighed. He walked slowly and deliberately fell behind. Then, he looked back at the gray stone. The stone that had decided his fate was still sitting there quietly at this moment. It was as if all of this had nothing to do with it. It was just a tool, but this tool had decided the future of so many people. Muyu couldn't help but think about what would have happened if he had let that warm current control him just now. He had a hunch that his talent level was definitely not gray. It would definitely have its own color, but what would it be? Muyu really wanted to test it again, but he didn't have the chance now. He planned to see if he could sneak back at night. Even if the situation just now happened at night, no one would care, right? Muyu retracted his gaze. However, just as he was about to turn around, he suddenly saw a person appear next to the gray stone. It was a plainly dressed old man with white hair and a white beard. There was an indescribable aura on his body. He was like an old man who lived in a mountain village, but with an additional sense of immortality. Chapter 11. Muyu caught up to the person in front of him, who was walking toward the courtyard. This academy was very big, and many immortal masters walked in and out. This place was equivalent to a relay station for immortal masters. Muyu saw the people of the same age who had been selected just now. Some of them curiously stared at this group of people and pointed at them at the same time. Some of them even sneered, looking down on these gray, gifted disciples. Already said, what kind of good-for-nothing trash can come out of a village without talent? At this moment, an ear-piercing voice came from beside Muyu. A discordant person suddenly blocked Muyu's path. Muyu raised his head and saw that it was indeed Little Tiger. Little Tiger's appearance caused many people to stop and watch. After all, this person's talent was outstanding. His current status was naturally not something that Muyu, a gray, gifted disciple, could compare to. Everyone wanted to know why this rising star would make things difficult for the lowest-ranked disciple. Go away. Muyu did not want to have a conflict with him. He felt that it was unfair. If he passed the test normally, then even if he was not as good as Little Tiger, he would not be ridiculed here. Oomph. A piece of trash like you dares to talk to me like this? Little Tiger rudely pushed Muyu. Muyu took a step back and frowned as he asked, "What do you want?" Little Tiger sneered and said, "I heard that you, the unrated disciples, are servants for us, the legitimate disciples. You, a servant, dare to talk to me like this? Don't go too far," Muyu lightly said, and then walked forward. However, Little Tiger once again blocked his path. "Little young master, do you need something?" Deacon Sun quickly rushed over and said with an apologetic smile. Of course, he recognized this amazing child. Little Tiger's talent meant that he was destined to have great achievements in the future. How could Deacon Sun dare to offend him? "You are the deacon here, right? Is she the head of the servants?" Xiaohu asked. Deacon Sun's face turned pale. In fact, Little Tiger was right. He used to be one of these gray disciples. His talent wasn't much better than these disciples. Just like these disciples, he hoped to be selected by a sect one day and stayed in the academy. However, he ended up being a servant for the rest of his life. When he got old, he became the head of the servants. In other words, he was just the steward of the academy. "Yes, young master," Deacon Sun said respectfully. It was very common for people like them to be looked down upon by immortal masters. However, what could they do even if they were unconvinced? For the sake of the illusory immortal cultivation dream, she wasted her entire life and became a servant for those true immortals. The reason why they could endure this kind of life was because their status among the mortals was very high. If they left the academy, they would be nothing. If that's the case, then fine. Make him admit that he's a good-for-nothing, and I'll let him go. Xiao pointed at Mu Yu and said, "In your dreams." Mu Yu's eyes narrowed. That's not very good. He's just a newcomer. For the time being, he doesn't need to listen to anyone's orders. Before he reaches the age of 16, he doesn't need to serve any immortal masters. This is also a rule. Deacon Sun quickly said, "There's such a rule? Then you must be at least 16 years old. Will you listen to my orders?" The tiger's eyes rolled around as he asked. Deacon Sun respectfully said, "Young master, if there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to tell me. Make him say that he's a good-for-nothing." Xiaohu aggressively said. Deacon Sun glanced at Mu Yu and then shook his head. "I can't do that. Before they reach the age of 16, they are not good-for-nothings." Deacon Sun actually protected Mu Yu and the other disciples. This made many gray disciples feel a little relieved. At least Deacon Sun was a good person. Although he was a little servile, he knew right from wrong. Mu Yu also looked at Deacon Sun gratefully. In fact, Deacon Sun didn't need to protect them. After all, many gray disciples were destined to have no fate with immortal cultivation. They were at the bottom of the cultivation world. However, Deacon Sun had his own rules. He was in charge of these disciples. If he allowed them to be humiliated, who would be willing to continue staying here? "Oomph, you stinking old man. Then you can at least call yourself a good-for-nothing on his behalf." Xiaohu looked at the smiles of the people around him. He was proud of his outstanding talent and always felt a little smug. He felt that he couldn't order these gray disciples to do things. No matter what, he was still a proud son of heaven. It was unreasonable for him to lose face here. Even a servant dared to not listen to him. Therefore, he vented his anger on Deacon Sun. Deacon Sun's face turned red, but he had no choice. The cultivation world also had its own rules. He took a deep breath and then said, "I am..." "Deacon Sun, don't say it." "Xiaohu, what right do you have to call others a good-for-nothing? Everyone has the qualifications to cultivate. We haven't even started cultivating yet, and your tail is already wagging to the sky. What do you have to be proud of? For years later, who knows who will be better than who?" Mu Yu walked over and interrupted Deacon Sun's words. He said angrily. Mu Yu rarely got angry. This was the first time he had seen such a shameless person. "You dare to provoke me?" Xiaohu was also angry when he saw the people around him laughing at him. He couldn't wait to beat Mu Yu to the ground. However, he felt that he was now an immortal master and should act like one. It was too ugly for children to fight. Therefore, he restrained himself. "I think this little friend is right. Little kid, you haven't even started cultivating yet. Don't spout such arrogant words." At this moment, an amiable voice overpowered everyone. An old man with a white beard and plain clothes slowly walked over and stared at Mu Yu with interest. Mu Yu realized that this old man was the same old man who was pacing back and forth beside the gray stone. "Which servant are you?" Xiaohu asked angrily. "Xiaohu, shut up." At this moment, Baoyang appeared at the right time. He walked over and politely cupped his hands towards the old man with a white beard. "Sect Master Feng, please forgive him. This child speaks without thinking and doesn't know etiquette. I will naturally teach him a lesson when we return. I apologize on his behalf." "Sect Master Feng? Which sect's sect master?" Mu Yu muttered in his heart. So this was the sect master. It was rare for a sect master to speak up for a gray disciple that he had never met. This was something that many people didn't expect. "It's fine. Nephew Bai is too polite. What you rely on now is your talent. In the future, you will have to rely on your temperament." The old man smiled and left with his hands behind his back. When he passed by Mu Yu, he even winked at Mu Yu kindly, causing Mu Yu to be confused. "When we return, we have to start learning etiquette and manners. As a student of Qing Song School, you shouldn't be so arrogant," Baoyang said to Xiaohu before leaving with Xiaohu. "Isn't that sect Master Feng from the Falling Dust sect?" "Yes. I heard that this is a mediocre sect. People look down on them." "Don't. Although they don't have many people in their sect, the sect master's cultivation isn't something that you and I can discuss. Speaking of which, they didn't recruit any new disciples this year, right? When did they recruit any new disciples?" "That's true." Chapter 12. Deacon Sun brought this group of unwanted disciples back to a courtyard and arranged rooms for them. Looking at this group of immature faces, Deacon Sun shook his head slightly. Maybe they would become him in the future, and maybe some of them would choose to leave. But no matter what, they were still children, and he had to protect them. If a person was ruined from a young age, then his life would be ruined. I will give you 4 years. After 4 years, you can either leave the academy and live a mortal life again, or become a member of the academy and wait to be chosen by a certain sect. You have to cherish this opportunity. Deacon Sun touched the head of one of the children and sighed in his heart. Senior Deacon, was there anyone who was chosen by a sect before? Muyu asked. Deacon Sun still had an impression of Muyu. He nodded and said, yes, and there are quite a few of them. Many people have become a member of a sect because of their hard work. Moreover, it may not necessarily be 4 years later. It may be many years later. As long as you are lucky enough, you may be accepted as a follower by an elder of a sect if you perform well. Don't underestimate the status of a follower. A follower of an elder of a sect has the same status as an ordinary disciple. Moreover, you can learn many powerful immortal techniques. Many people were moved. Although they were not chosen by a sect, they still had a chance in the future. As long as there was a chance, they had to cherish it. Firm expressions appeared on the faces of this group of innocent children. Everyone hoped that they could work hard to become a member of a sect. Everyone had hope on their faces, except for Muyu, who was not encouraged by these words. If it was really so easy to be chosen by an elder of a sect, then why were there still so many great disciples in the academy? Deacon Sun turned and left. Muyu still had some things he didn't understand, so he followed Deacon Sun and called out, Kid, what's the matter? Deacon Sun was a very patient person. If it wasn't for this, he wouldn't have become a deacon of the academy. Muyu hesitated for a moment and asked, Senior, the immortal master ordered you to leave. Why didn't you leave? Deacon Sun saw that Muyu was polite, and in addition to what happened just now, he admired this child. After a while, he sighed and said, Leave? How could it be so easy? How many people hoped to become a cultivator their whole life? Many people didn't give up and believed that they would succeed one day. However, how many people wasted their whole life without achieving anything? In the end, he still couldn't put down his pride. Back then, I also came to this school with the Song Taoist. He was chosen by a great sect, and in the end, he established his own sect and became the overlord of a region. However, I had to bow and scrape in front of his disciple. Who would be willing to do that? However, the academy has its own rules. If you choose to stay after 4 years, you will be a servant of the academy for the rest of your life. You will have to serve the cultivators of those sects for the rest of your life. There are only 2 ways to leave. One is to be taken away by an elder of a certain sect. The other is to die. Deacon Sun was dejected. Obviously, he had chosen to stay because he hoped that one day he would be chosen by an elder of a certain sect. However, he was still a servant even when his hair was white. Who could explain the hardships during this period? Muyu was shocked. It turned out that Deacon Sun was the same age as the legendary Song Taoist. However, at this moment, the Song Taoist had become an immortal respected by everyone in the cultivation world, while Deacon Sun was just a servant who was ordered around. Muyu didn't expect the rules of the academy to be so cruel. If he still wasn't chosen by a sect after 4 years, would he leave or stay? Given Muyu's character, he would definitely leave. He wouldn't choose to be a servant just because of an illusory idea. There were many ways to succeed. Why did he choose this path? Muyu thought so, but many people were not reconciled. Whether it was the young guards at the entrance of the academy, the middle-aged immortal master who maintained order, or the white-haired old man in front of him, they were not reconciled to have no fate with cultivation. They worked hard to serve those high and mighty cultivators, hoping that one day they could change their fate. However, Deacon Sun's life was a sad example. Which sect would be willing to take a fancy to a person with inferior aptitude? Kid, I think you have a good temperament, so I advise you to leave if there is no possibility of cultivation after 4 years. No matter who it is, I will persuade them to leave. However, for so many years, the academy has never been short of manpower. Many people stubbornly stay here. Alas, I was just as stubborn in the past. In the end, I was reduced to a servant for the rest of my life. Why bother? Deacon Sun touched Mu Yu's head with a sorrowful expression. There were tears in his eyes. For some reason, Mu Yu's words today reminded him of many things in the past. Perhaps no one had ever asked him why he didn't leave. In the eyes of many mortals, Deacon Sun was a member of the high and mighty immortal masters. However, they didn't know that Deacon Sun was actually the lowest existence in the cultivation world. Senior, if I can become a member of the cultivation world in the future, I will definitely come back to take you away, Mu Yu said solemnly. Today, Deacon Sun chose to protect them even though he knew that he would offend a genius in the cultivation world in the future. This showed that Deacon Sun was a kind old man who was forced to become a servant here because he had no other choice. People often had to pay the price for their past choices. If such a day really comes, if I can really leave this place, then I will be willing to become your servant. Being ordered around by you alone is better than being ordered around by so many people, Deacon Sun said with a smile. Although his status here was low, he was in charge of all the servants in the academy. However, he did not look down on any of the servants. There are some things that one would only know when one was older. When he was young, he stubbornly wanted to stay. Now, there was not a moment when he didn't want to leave this place. Mu Yu was still young, but Deacon Sun understood these principles. If Mu Yu could really make a name for himself in the future, then it would be good to form a good relationship with him now. Mu Yu also smiled and said, Senior, don't worry. I won't do that to you. Go back and rest. No matter what happens in the future, you just have to work hard from tomorrow onwards. Deacon Sun sighed. Sometimes, only the words of children could comfort people. The older a person was, the more unpleasant their words would be. Deacon Sun never forced anything. He just wanted to encourage Mu Yu. In fact, what he didn't tell Mu Yu was that less than 1/10 of these gray status disciples could escape from their fate. Although Mu Yu might have a diligent temperament, talent was also very important when it came to cultivation. Deacon Sun didn't think highly of Mu Yu. Deacon Sun didn't think highly of Mu Yu only because of Mu Yu's superficial aptitude. However, Mu Yu was still very curious about what his true talent was. Therefore, after everyone fell asleep, a thin and weak figure sneaked out and tiptoed in a certain direction. Chapter 13. Late at night, the bright moon hung alone in the sky. The surroundings were quiet, and only the chirping of crickets would occasionally break the silence. Mu Yu looked around. Many immortal masters would stay here for the night and leave the next day. It was very late now, and many immortal masters must have gone to bed. There were a few rooms that were still lit, and he had to be careful not to be discovered by the immortal masters. He tried his best to take the long way around. For him, as long as there was a tree, it was not difficult to climb over a wall. There were faint voices in front of him. Mu Yu dodged and hid in a tree. He saw two young men walking over from afar. They were undoubtedly the gray disciples of the school. It's so late, and they still want us to serve them. Damn it, one of the young men complained. We can't help it. The elder of the Jihua school has a high status. We should serve him well. If he's happy and accepts us as his followers, it's not bad, the other young man said hopefully. That elder has a strange temper. Yesterday, a senior brother accidentally spilled tea on him and was sent flying by a slap. I heard that the senior brother has no chance of becoming an immortal now. His dantian was damaged, and he can only be a gray disciple for the rest of his life. Thinking of this, the person who spoke could not help but shiver. It was said that being in the king's company was like being in the tiger's company. For disciples at the bottom of the cultivation world like them, if they were not careful, their lives would be in danger. It was too difficult for gray disciples to climb up in the cultivation world. Don't complain. Most of the elders have strange tempers. We just have to make sure everything is in order. That senior brother can't blame anyone for not doing his job when serving the elder. The other young man still had hope. He did not feel sorry for the senior brother who was in trouble. Instead, it was natural for that person to be beaten for not serving the elder well. When the two people gradually walked away, Muyu jumped down from the tree. He looked at the backs of the two people with mixed feelings. Gray disciples were at the bottom of the cultivation world. It was common for them to be humiliated or beaten. They did not even have any thoughts of resistance. However, on second thought, they could not resist even if they wanted to. Immortal masters had extraordinary means, so how could gray disciples resist? If he offended an elder, even if he was killed, no one would care. The two gray disciples looked to be over 16 years old. It was obvious that they had chosen to stay, hoping to find an opportunity to catch the eye of an elder of a sect and join a sect. Their dedication to cultivation made them silently accept the orders of those high and mighty immortal masters. For that illusory opportunity, they might be trapped in the school for the rest of their lives. However, they seemed unwilling to give up, so they live a life of fear and trepidation every day. Muyu clenched his fists. He did not want to be a gray disciple. He wasn't willing to bow and scrape for the rest of his life. He had to find a way to leave the academy. However, he didn't have any ability to change so far. The only thing that could make him feel better was to retest the color of his talent. Regardless of whether he knew it or not, he had to at least prove that his aptitude was not inferior to others. There was no one on duty at the academy at night because no one dared to cause trouble here. Only immortal masters with extraordinary means would barge in here unless they were tired of living. Muyu turned a corner in a courtyard. Relying on his memory from the day, he found a place to test the stone. There was an iron door in front of him that had been locked. However, there was a small tree beside the wall. Muyu blended into the tree and climbed up the stone wall very easily. He stood on the stone wall and could vaguely see the stone that tested his talent during the day lying not far away. Muyu was afraid of heights. He did not dare to jump down. He could only grab the top of the wall with his hand and slowly extend his body down. Then his hand loosened and he fell down, landing heavily on the ground. Muyu got up and patted the dust off his body. He hid in the shadows and looked around. After confirming that there was no one, he tiptoed toward the stone. Under the moonlight, the ugly gray stone showed a strange halo, which made it look a little strange. It was only noticed once a year. After a year, it would be an ordinary stone that was battered by the wind and rain. Only the gray disciples would occasionally come to clean it. Muyu felt that such a treasure should be kept. After all, this was a treasure used to select the talent of the disciples. It would not be good if it was damaged. However, this stone was so big. It was twice the size of Muyu. It would be troublesome to move it around. In fact, this stone needed to absorb the spiritual energy and essence of heaven and earth. Under the baptism of the sun and moon, it could maintain its spirituality. This was also the reason why the people in the academy did not put it away. Muyu did not understand the situation of the cultivation world. He grew up in a village. How would he know these things? Muyu looked at the stone. This stone determined his identity and fate during the day. If he did not have any scruples during the day, it should have evaluated him to a higher level of talent, right? If he was evaluated as blue or green by the stone, then his fate would be different. Maybe he would also enter a good sect and not fall to the point where no one wanted him. But what was the use of testing it? Muyu suddenly hesitated. So what if his talent was blue? No one here saw or knew. Even if the stone shone brightly during the test, it would be useless. Because no one could prove it, no one would specially come to see the results of his talent appraisal. If he ran to others and said that his true talent was not gray, no one would believe him. They would only treat him as a joke. When he was tested in the village, the immortal master did not pay much attention to it. His talent must be ordinary. Why should he humiliate himself? However, because he gave up halfway during the day, the stone did not show the color it should have. This made Muyu very unhappy. Sometimes things were like this. Something could be done better, but because of some accident, it was messed up. He did not use his true ability and was labeled as unworthy of the name. This was a very uncomfortable thing. Even if his talent was not enough to attract the immortal master's attention, there should at least be a red or orange reaction. He just wanted to understand everything. He did not want to become a gray disciple and be trampled on for the rest of his life. He calmed himself down and then slowly placed his hand on the gray stone. He thought about it. No matter what color it was, as long as it was better than gray, then he would at least have an idea in his heart and would not lose hope for the future. When his hand touched the stone, it was not cold. Instead, it had a faint temperature. That familiar warm current came from the stone again and flowed through all the meridians in his body. His body was taken away from him again, but at the same time, his five senses became extremely sharp. He saw the sleeping grass suddenly shake off the dew on its leaves. Its branches and leaves swayed, and its roots grew continuously. Muyu also noticed that the buds that were supposed to bloom the next morning were trembling at this moment. They began to shake their petals as if they were responding to Muyu and were beginning to bloom. These feelings were not unfamiliar to Muyu. He had previously discovered that he could control the growth rate of plants, but he did not dare to make it too obvious. This was because Yumon could also control trees. He was afraid that others would notice something was wrong, so he did not dare to let the plants grow too obviously. At this moment, his body was no longer under his control. The flowers and plants were also moving freely under his influence. Their branches and leaves continued to emerge and began to grow out of season. Muyu could not stop any of this. A pleasant feeling came from the surrounding plants. The seeds that were buried in the ground once again emerged happily. They grew at a speed visible to the naked eye and drilled out of the ground to feel the clarity of the world. Muyu liked this feeling very much. It was like a spring breeze blowing past and the earth returning to spring. Everything became lively and energetic, and his spirit could not help but be invigorated. He felt that there was a certain flow of air flowing through his meridians. This flow of air was very strange. He had not discovered this flow of air in his body before. After the warm current entered his body, this flow of air came out of nowhere and spread throughout his body. It was full of vitality and was then attracted by the gray stone. It flowed endlessly and endlessly into the gray stone. After a while, the warm current of the gray stone gradually receded. It seemed to have completed its mission and returned to the embrace of the stone. The surrounding flowers and plants stopped growing. Everything returned to normal. A gentle breeze blew past, and the plants rustled and swayed, echoing with the chirping of crickets. The surroundings were filled with flowers and plants that were full of vitality. Every plant was past the knees, and there was even the fragrance of the flowers. It rippled in the night wind and refreshed the mind. A refreshing feeling pervaded the surroundings. Muyu felt refreshed, as if he had been reborn. What color will it be? Muyu closed his eyes tightly. He did not dare to open them immediately. He knew that at this moment, the stone should show a color. He had a premonition that this time, it would definitely not be gray. Would it be red or yellow? Muyu was a little nervous. He did not even dare to imagine a color above yellow. He felt that if he had yellow, it would be a good thing. Chapter 14. Gray was still gray. Muyu felt as if a bucket of water had been poured over him from head to toe. His whole body was cold. Gray? How is this possible? He couldn't believe his eyes. He had always thought that his innate talent was definitely not as simple as gray. At the very least, it should be red. After all, there was something in his body that was constantly flowing toward the stone. The feeling was so obvious. So how could it only be gray? However, the stone didn't change for a long time. Even if Muyu wanted to stare through it, it was of no use. The stone was still gray and looked very ordinary. It flashed a halo under the moonlight, as if it was mocking Muyu's ignorance and would only be satisfied after being hit again. Was his talent still not good enough? Muyu put down his hand and walked to the steps with some frustration. He sat down with his back to the stone. He buried his head in the crook of his arm. He didn't cry, but he felt very sad. The village head's simple and honest voice and eager eyes echoed in his mind. He thought of the genius Xiaohu, who was the moon surrounded by stars, and his aggressive appearance in front of everyone during the day. He thought of the importance of talent in the cultivation world and Deacon Sun, who had been ordered around like a servant all his life. He was very unwilling to accept this. Why was it gray? Was he really not suitable for cultivation? Muyu sighed. At first, he didn't like cultivation. If the village head hadn't been so eager to let him become an immortal admired by thousands of people, he wouldn't have come to the school. However, after he came, the village head was mocked by people from other villages, and Xiaohu made things difficult for him. He suddenly felt unconvinced. Why could others but not him? If he went back to the village now, he was afraid that everyone would point fingers at him. When the villagers learned that he was going to become an immortal, they came to send him off so enthusiastically. If he went back like this, wouldn't he become a laughingstock? He finally understood why the great disciples of the school chose to stay. They came to the school with great joy and were about to become immortals under the expectations of their families. However, they were told that they could only be great disciples or go home directly. What would they choose? Go home and be mocked by the villagers? They chose to stay. At this moment, Mu Yu's mood was the same as those who weren't chosen. He was extremely depressed. Why let a stone decide your fate? A kind voice suddenly sounded in Mu Yu's ears, startling Mu Yu. He jumped up reflexively and looked in surprise at the person who had suddenly appeared next to him. It was an old man with white hair and a white beard. He was dressed plainly, and there were patches on his clothes. This person was actually the sect master of the Falling Dust sect, who had spoken up for Mu Yu during the day. At this moment, he was sitting on the steps where Mu Yu had been sitting. His wise eyes blinked kindly at Mu Yu as he looked at Mu Yu with a smile on his face. "You, why are you here?" Mu Yu felt a lingering fear in his heart. Just now, he did not notice how the other party came. This old man seemed to have appeared out of thin air. He did not make any sound and just silently appeared beside Mu Yu, catching him off guard. Master Feng sat on the steps and stared at Mu Yu with interest. He said with a smile, "He walked over." Walked over? Mu Yu did not hear any footsteps. "I'll leave first. I won't disturb you any further." Mu Yu did not know what to say for a moment. Logically speaking, he should be sleeping obediently on the bed right now and not wandering around at night. The other party was an immortal master while he was a gray disciple. If he angered the other party, he might end up like that injured senior brother of his. No one would pity him if he was crippled. You walk through a cultivator's courtyard in the middle of the night. You have to know that to cultivators, even if they don't walk out of their rooms, they can still tell that someone is tiptoeing past. It's not a good thing to wander around at night. Aren't you going to explain why? Master Feng did not put on the airs of sect master at all. Instead, he was like an easygoing old man who had specially come to talk to Mu Yu to relieve his boredom. Mu Yu did not expect that someone would still find out about him despite being so careful. This made him feel a little scared. This old man should not have seen him merging with the trees, right? If he had, the consequences would be unimaginable. Mu Yu hurriedly said, I'm sorry. I didn't know that I would disturb you. I'm not the only one who was disturbed. However, I help you hide it. The other fellow Taoists probably mistook you for me, so they didn't notice you." Master Feng's words caused Mu Yu to be extremely shocked. So he had already been discovered by others when he snuck out at night? He thought that he had done it very covertly. The methods of immortals were extraordinary. It was not something he could imagine. He was still too young, so that's how it is. I was reckless. Thank you, Senior. Mu Yu did not know why the other party wanted to help him. He was just a gray disciple. No one would care about the life and death of a gray disciple. Only this old man seemed to be different. He had helped her once during the day and again at night. Was her luck too good? The moonlight tonight is not bad. Master Feng did not mind. He only looked at the night sky as if he was admiring the bright moon. Mu Yu did not say anything. He just stood there, admiring the night sky with a high and mighty, immortal master by a rock in the middle of the night. This made Mu Yu feel somewhat uncomfortable. Do you think a rock can decide your future? Master Feng asked after a long time. Mu Yu shook his head. I don't think so. It's just that the appraisal of the rock makes me a little unwilling. Oh, then what can make you willing? Master Feng asked curiously. Mu Yu was silent. He was still young and did not know what path he would take in the future. He only knew that his goal in coming here was to cultivate and not let down the village chief's hopes. However, his last bit of hope had been destroyed. This made him very depressed. He was not a cultivator, and he would never be able to catch up to Xiaohu. I don't know. After a long time, Muyu finally spoke. He really did not know what to do to make himself willing. Surpass Xiaohu? Muyu thought of Xiaohu's overbearing appearance during the day and how everyone looked at Xiaohu with anticipation. What could he do to surpass that fellow who insulted him? Xiaohu had already been accepted as a disciple by Qingsong School. His future was bright, but his talent was only an ugly gray color. His future was bleak, so how could he surpass him? Mortals call us immortal masters, but only we know that no one is worthy of the title Immortal Master. At most, we are just cultivators. In the cultivation world, no one has ever called us immortal masters. Therefore, don't care how powerful an immortal master is. The cultivation environment is not the most important thing. What's important is what you want. What kind of person you want to be, you have to fight for it yourself. Don't rely on a rock to decide. Master Feng said slowly. But without talent, it seems that you can't enter any sect. Muyu said softly. He wanted to fight for it, but he was completely blind on this path. He did not know how to fight for it. If he did not enter a sect and became a servant disciple here, being ordered around by other cultivators, when could he become an immortal master? It doesn't matter whether your talent is gray or green. Cultivation relies on luck and hard work. Talent only gives you a shortcut. Those without talent will only take a few more turns. Cultivation is a winding path. If you don't even have the determination and perseverance to take a detour, then how can you talk about cultivation? Master Feng broke off a flower from a crack in the rock and played with it in his hand. This flower should not have appeared here. Its flowering period was still early. It was just that Muyu had unintentionally allowed it to appear earlier. The path of cultivation was winding. The most important thing was to rely on one's own determination and perseverance. Muyu pondered over the old man's words, but his heart became clearer and clearer. It was as if a ray of sunlight had swept away the haze in his heart. Nothing was easy to accomplish. Many things had to go through a lot of trials and tribulations to succeed. If he gave up without trying, then how could he pursue success? Muyu slowly nodded and respectfully bowed. Thank you, senior. This junior has learned. Muyu stood up. He knew what he had to do next. If he really wanted to pursue that immortal fate, then his fate could not be controlled by this rock. He could start as a gray disciple. No one could say for sure what would happen in the future. He just did not like Little Tiger's arrogant appearance. He wanted to defeat Little Tiger and prove that his village was not the so-called village with no future. However, he suddenly thought of something and asked after a while, Senior, I wonder if you can accept me? Master Feng looked at Muyu and said with a smile, My sect, it is at the bottom of the 20 sections. Many people are not willing to come. Moreover, I basically do not recruit disciples from the school. Then how can I enter Senior's sect? Muyu sincerely asked. Why do you want a poor and declining sect? Sect Master Feng asked in return. Isn't that what Senior said? The cultivation environment is not the most important thing. So regardless of whether it is the first or last ranked sect, it is fine as long as one can cultivate. Muyu said. Master Feng laughed. You're using my words to stop me. In that case, can't you stay in the school to cultivate? But if I have someone like Senior to guide me, perhaps my path will be easier. Muyu sincerely wanted to kneel, but he realized that there was an invisible resistance preventing him from kneeling. He was somewhat puzzled, not understanding why his legs were not listening to him. Don't be in a hurry to make a decision. Perhaps after seeing this, you won't want to come to my sect. Master Feng stood up and turned his gaze to the gray rock. He continued, This rock will not show any color without enough light shining on it. Therefore, it is impossible to accurately display a person's true talent at night. As for what your talent is, it is best for you to see for yourself. Muyu did not understand what Master Feng meant. He watched Master Feng's actions. Master Feng waved his hand, and a flying sword appeared out of thin air. It suddenly lit up with a white light. Under the illumination of the white light, the rock suddenly turned from an ugly gray to a noble purple. Purple. Chapter 15. My talent is purple. Muyu opened his mouth wide in disbelief. He had originally thought that his talent was definitely not just gray, but at the very least, yellow. Who knew that his talent was the legendary purple? It was the purple that people yearned for. What did purple mean? Purple was the best cultivation talent. A cyan talent had already shocked many cultivators, but a purple talent that was even more powerful than cyan was probably unheard of in the cultivation world. How could they have imagined that an ordinary gray disciple would actually be hiding a purple talent? The legendary purple talent was the most suitable physique for cultivation. One's comprehension ability was 100 times stronger than an ordinary person's, and one wouldn't even appear in 100,000 people. When had these sects ever seen a genius with purple talent? If Mu Yu hadn't stopped in time during the day, the news of his purple talent would have caused an unprecedented sensation in the cultivation world. What a pity. If someone saw your talent during the day, I'm afraid many people would go crazy. Sect Master Feng said calmly. He was different from the others and wasn't surprised by the purple talent. It was as though it was an extremely normal thing. With a purple talent, one's path of cultivation would be practically unimpeded. They could achieve twice the results with half the effort of ordinary people. If a cyan talent could shock those cultivators to such an extent, a purple talent would definitely be amazing. You already knew that my talent was purple? It took Muyu a long time to slowly calm down the waves in his heart. He couldn't see through the old man in front of him. If his talent could make many people go crazy, why was he the only one who didn't show any signs of it? I'm different from them. I don't rely on stones to determine a person's talent. Sect Master Feng answered Muyu's question. He put away his flying sword and turned his head to ask, now that you know that your talent is purple, if you want to enter Qing Song School, I'm afraid the Qing Song Taoist will immediately take you in as his last disciple. Your potential is even above Bai Liang's, so you don't have to enter my Falling Dust sect. After all, my Falling Dust sect isn't as strong as Qing Song School. Muyu was stunned, from hope to disappointment, and then back to hope. The ups and downs of life were all experienced by Muyu that night. It was hard for him to calm down. Thinking back to how arrogant Little Tiger was during the day with his cyan innate talent, Little Tiger was nothing in front of him now that he had a purple innate talent. As long as he was willing, entering Qing Song School would not be a problem at all. He could even trample Little Tiger under his feet and ruthlessly humiliate it. Muyu could even see himself becoming another Bai Liang in the future. He even had the confidence to surpass Bai Liang through his own efforts and become the center of attention. He could imagine the village chief's ecstatic expression. Village chief Old Bu could now straighten his back and talk cheerfully in front of other village chiefs, especially the Big Tiger village chief from the Big Tiger village. Perhaps he would be extremely shocked, right? Muyu was also willing to let the village head lead him out for a walk to give the village head face. But what was all this for? What could he do after showing off? Would an undeserved reputation hinder a person's future? Muyu recalled the story of the village chief's eternal wound. It was about a young prodigy who was startled since young and neglected his studies. In the end, he became an ordinary person. This was not what Muyu hoped for. Plop! Muyu knelt down and kowtowed to Sect Master Feng, saying, "Senior, please accept me as your disciple." Muyu's words were very firm. He did not feel that he had lost anything. He only felt that he was doing what he should do. The old man in front of him allowed Muyu to see some things clearly. Muyu felt that even if he could not receive good guidance in his cultivation, he would benefit greatly from the way he dealt with people. Stand up. Sect Master Feng was still as calm as ever. My name is Feng Haochen, the sect master of the Falling Dust sect. What is your name? My name is Muyu. Muyu said respectfully. You have made your choice. Then come with me. My Falling Dust sect has no problem with you. However, my Falling Dust sect disciples do not have gray or purple innate talents. Therefore, no matter how good your innate talent is, you will not receive any special treatment in my sect. Feng Haochen stroked his beard, then looked around and said, the higher the level of talent, the slower the speed at which the color of the spirit testing stone dissipates. I estimate that the purple light of this stone will only fade after an hour. As long as it is not exposed to strong light, no one will notice it. You were right not to reveal your innate talent today, because these strange plants could very well take your life. Cultivators hate Yumon's existence very much. No matter how good your innate talent is, it is useless. Yumon. Me. Muyu's body froze. His face instantly turned extremely pale. He had been immersed in the problem of his innate talent and had actually forgotten about these strange plants. Now that the old man in front of him had noticed it, wouldn't it bring about a disaster? The Immortal Master and the Yummering Devil clan were sworn enemies. The Immortal Master's existence was to exterminate the Yummering Devil clan, but he had accidentally exposed his abilities in front of a sect master. How terrifying was that? Could it be that the old man had already noticed something during the day? Otherwise, why would he specifically check the situation around the platform after all the tests were over? If he had really revealed his purple innate talent today, these plants would have brought about a disaster for him. As expected, fortune was accompanied by misfortune. Great risks were also hidden in opportunities. I don't know. I didn't. Muyu stuttered. The old man in front of him could kill him with a single finger. Yumon's existence was not allowed in the cultivation world, and Muyu himself could not explain why he had this ability. I know you are not Yumon, but many people in the cultivation world will not believe you. This is also why I came to find you at night, to guide you and to protect you. Feng Haochen looked at the starry sky as if he was recalling something. Then he continued, You don't have to explain anything to me. Just keep your secret. Feng Haochen waved his sleeves again. A majestic spiritual energy surged out from his sleeves and covered all the plants around the platform. With a gentle shake, all the plants turned into nothingness. Everything returned to its original state as if they had never existed. Muyu stared blankly at Feng Haochen. Was this the power of a cultivator? Being able to turn the plants around into nothingness with just a wave of his hand? Would he also have this ability in the future? Master, am I the only freak in the world who has Yumon's ability? Muyu asked softly. That's not it. If I'm not wrong, there should be 5 people who have Yumon's ability. Your ability is to control wood. Then there are people who can control fire, water, earth, and metal. Feng Haochen said. Muyu felt a little better knowing that he was not the only freak. He continued to ask, Master, why do we have these abilities? Why do you believe me? You'll understand in the future. Some things can only be understood when you're strong enough. Otherwise, you won't be able to keep your secret. I'll send you back first. Let's go. Feng Haochen walked out with his hands behind his back. Muyu hurriedly followed. Master, I have another question. Since my talent is so high, why did the green little tiger rock flash when I was testing it at the entrance, but it didn't flash when I touched it? Muyu followed Feng Haochen's footsteps with big strides. The metal door that they came from earlier had been opened. Muyu and Feng Haochen passed through the metal door and walked towards the Grey Disciples' courtyard where Muyu was. When they passed by other sects' courtyards, Muyu was quite curious about the Immortal Master's methods when he thought about how he was detected by the Immortal Master inside. The small rock they created is different from the big rock just now. That big rock is called the Spirit Testing Rock. It's a spiritual object between heaven and earth. It can test everyone's talent. And the small stones used for the preliminary screening were imitations made by other cultivators. Because of the limited ability of imitations and the fact that they have never seen a purple talent before, and because they can't make the reaction of a purple talent, I think they can only flash when they identify a green or blue talent at most. After hearing this, Muyu felt relieved. No wonder his talent didn't flash like the little tiger rock when he was tested in the village. It turned out that the rock didn't react to his purple talent. Instead, it only reacted to green and blue talents. Then, Master, why don't the sect recruit their own disciples? Why do they recruit from the academy? Doesn't this mean that the weaker sects won't be able to recruit good disciples? Muyu regretted asking this question as soon as he asked because he had just entered a weak sect. Putting aside the manpower, there's only 1 spirit testing rock and 5 imitation spirit testing rocks. The materials needed to make the imitation spirit testing rock are too precious, and the testing methods are limited. They had no choice but to choose this compromise. Feng Haochen smiled, not minding that Muyu had accidentally belittled the falling dust sect. Muyu still wanted to ask his master how he could tell his talent without the spirit testing rock, but Feng Haochen didn't want to answer this question. Therefore, Muyu didn't understand what his master meant by, "I don't use the rock to determine a person's talent." Could it be that he could only rely on his eyes? The full moon in the night sky was as clear as water, shining down on the master and disciple. Muyu didn't know how important of a choice he had made tonight. If he had entered the Qing Song school instead of the falling dust sect after finding out about his talent, then his life would have been in danger. This was because if he wanted to prove his talent, he would have to reveal his ability to control wood. This was something that other self-cultivators wouldn't allow. Feng Haochen was testing Muyu's character and also teaching Muyu some principles. Not everyone in the self-cultivator world was like Feng Haochen, who could ignore the fact that Muyu had the ability to control wood Yumon. Chapter 16. You've been accepted as a disciple by the head of the falling dust sect. The next day, Muyu bid farewell to Deacon Sun. Deacon Sun was very surprised. In the past, not a single gray, innate disciple had ever been accepted by a sect, let alone the falling dust sect, which had never accepted a disciple. Master said that I have a good temperament. Although my innate talent isn't good, I can still cultivate under him. Muyu didn't reveal the fact that he had purple innate talent. If he did, he would have to reveal that he had Yumon's ability. Even if he did, no one would believe him. Deacon Sun patted Muyu's shoulder and said, "The falling dust sect is a very strange sect. They never accept disciples, so they have very few disciples. However, Headfang's cultivation level is very high, so no one dares to have any ideas about them. In fact, it's said that Qing Song School is hard to enter, but I think the falling dust sect is the hardest sect to enter. Maybe there's something special about you that caught Headfang's attention. You have to cherish this opportunity. I don't want you to be trapped in the school forever like me." Muyu knew that Deacon Sun really wanted to leave the school, but he never had the chance. He said firmly, "Senior, don't worry. If I can achieve something in the future, I'll definitely take you away from this place. I don't have any cultivation right now, so I can't help you much. However, I'll definitely help you." Deacon Sun smiled. "It's good that you have such intentions. I hope I can wait until then." Deacon Sun's life was very sad. It wasn't just him, but also those who wanted to pursue immortality but didn't have the talent. If she could help someone who was good to her, Muyu naturally wouldn't refuse. "Let's go." Feng Haochen slowly walked over. If a disciple of the school was going to be taken away by a sect, he naturally had to inform Deacon Sun. "Greetings, sir." Deacon Sun respectfully bowed to Feng Haochen. "You're welcome. There's no need for secular etiquette." Feng Haochen knew that Deacon Sun was protecting Muyu yesterday, so he had a good impression of Deacon Sun. "Senior, we'll meet again." Muyu walked to Feng Haochen's side. With a wave of his sleeve, Feng Haochen brought Muyu up into the air, disappearing into the horizon. Deacon Sun looked at their backs as they left. His eyes were filled with envy, but there was also a hint of sadness. Muyu stood beside Feng Haochen. A flying sword was beneath Feng Haochen's feet, while Muyu was floating in the air. There seemed to be an invisible membrane beneath his feet that supported him. The scenery below flashed by, and Muyu's face was somewhat pale. He tried his best to focus his gaze on Feng Haochen, but his heart was beating like a drum. Many people will look at the scenery below in amazement when they fly for the first time. "Why do you look so sad?" Feng Haochen noticed that something was wrong with Muyu and asked. Muyu blinked and said, "It's so high here. Won't we all die if we fall?" Feng Haochen chuckled. "What? Are you afraid that I'll throw you down?" "No, it's just that I'm a bit afraid of heights." Muyu curled his lips. Why would a child be afraid of heights? You should know that cultivators shouldn't be afraid of heights because the most common thing we do is to fly. If you're afraid of heights, then how will you learn to fly on a sword in the future? Feng Haochen said with a smile. Anyone who falls from a cliff at the age of 5 will be afraid of heights. Muyu recalled his playful childhood. He climbed up Wild Goose Mountain by himself, and accidentally he fell down from the cliff. It scared him quite a bit back then. Feng Haochen took a step back and let Muyu stand on the sword. Then he kindly said, "Seeing that you're still alive and kicking here, you must have been saved by the trees, right? Master, you're really amazing to be able to guess this." Muyu said in surprise. He was indeed saved by the trees. When he fell, his head was facing down, and he could only see the forest below. He thought that it would be great if he could control the trees and catch him. In the end, the trees really formed a soft cushion and saved him. It was also at that time that he realized that he had the ability to control trees. However, it also left a shadow in his heart. He didn't dare to climb to higher places again. "Then I'll fly lower." Feng Haochen patted Muyu's head. Then, the two of them descended to a lower place. Muyu was a bit surprised. He didn't think that his master would be so easy to talk to. He asked, "Master, I thought you were going to tell me to conquer my fear and be a strong and good child or something like that. Why didn't you tell me to conquer my fear of heights?" If it was village chief Old Boo, he would definitely give him a lecture like that. Feng Haochen stroked his beard and said, "Since you already know all these things, wouldn't it be unnecessary for me to say them? But why are you so sure that I understand these things?" Muyu asked, puzzled. "Even if you don't understand, I don't think that you should overcome it now. Everyone has something that they are afraid of. We will always face our fears, but there are many ways to overcome it. Why do you have to choose to do it when you are not mentally prepared? Whether it was life or cultivation, nothing could be forced. It was best to let nature take its course. Everything has to be done step by step. The lower I fly, the safer your heart will be. When you are able to withstand this height, we will fly higher. This is the only way to conquer your fear of heights." Feng Haochen's flying altitude was already very low. He could even reach out and touch the trees below. His words were concise, but they contained profound principles. Muyu couldn't help but feel deep respect for him. This was the role model of a teacher. Education should be carried out in a curve and not forcefully instilled. Muyu suddenly rejoiced that he had met such a wise and far-sighted elder. The disciples of this old man were certainly not ordinary. His heart was filled with awe, and he had even more expectations for the sect he was about to join. Cultivation is actually about cultivating the state of mind. Your fear of heights is because your heart is unable to calm down. If your heart can be as calm as still water, then you will be able to handle many things with ease. You still have a long way to go in the future. If I tell you this now, you may not understand, but slowly you will understand. I can't be sloppy in the future. I have to learn from Master's calm temperament." Muyu said solemnly. Feng Haochen shook his head and said, "That won't be necessary. How should you be? Being naughty and lively is a child's nature. Why should you learn from others? Just be yourself. There are no rules in our sect. You can be whatever you want to be. Cultivation is to break free from the shackles of the world. If your personality is restricted by the rules, then it will be very difficult to achieve anything. As long as you don't do anything that goes against ethics, you could do anything." Muyu's eyes suddenly lit up. He had only heard the main points. He could do anything. Originally, he was still a little afraid of the unknown sect, but now he couldn't wait to start his new life. Chapter 17. Muyu did not know where they were flying to. In fact, he rarely left the village. After all, he was only 12 years old and was unfamiliar with the outside world. He only knew that his master had taken him to the north. They had been flying for about 4 to 6 hours before slowing down. If they were to walk, Muyu felt that it would take him 5 to 6 days to complete the journey. "We're here." Feng Haochen pointed at a mountain in front of them. The mountain in front of them was majestic, and white clouds surrounded the mountainside. A few houses could be vaguely seen hidden in the forest. The sound of cranes could be heard as many birds flew between the mountains. From the bottom of the mountain, there were vertical cliffs and cliffs. There were no mountain paths. It was impossible for ordinary people to reach a height of a few hundred meters. However, there was a platform in the middle of the cliffs. There were lush trees growing on it. Then, a small path could be vaguely seen, leading to a higher peak. The bottom half of the mountain was composed of cliffs and cliffs, while the top half was a forest. Muyu could vaguely see smoke rising from the mountain. This mountain is called Luochen Mountain. There are formations and restrictions on the mountain. Ordinary people cannot climb up or down. So, when you learn how to fly on a sword, you can freely descend a mountain. Feng Haochen would normally fly up directly. The mountain's restrictions were useless to him. However, since it was Muyu's first time here, it was reasonable for him to bring him along. Muyu saw that there was a huge rock halfway up Luochen Mountain. The rock was smooth and protruding like a viewing platform. At that moment, there were a few people lying or sitting on the rock. They looked very casual. "Master, there are a few people." Feng Haochen looked at the people on the rock and helplessly smiled. "They are your brothers from the same sect. It seems like they didn't have a good time when I wasn't around." Muyu scratched his head. He did not understand what his master meant. Logically speaking, without his master around, they should be able to defy the heavens. Why would they not have a good time? However, Feng Haochen had no intention of explaining, so he did not ask further. The two of them landed on the platform. In front of them was a relatively wide, open space. There was a plain and simple mountain gate in front of them. It looked very shabby and was made of wood. Only the two words "falling dust" were written on it. A winding stone staircase spiraled into the forest, faintly discernible. Feng Haochen stepped onto the stone steps and walked up the mountain. Muyu followed closely behind. The stone steps were made of bluestone slabs. Although it was messy, stepping on it felt very sturdy. There were all kinds of flowers and trees growing around the stone stairs. Some of the trees formed an arch above the stone stairs. It looked interesting. As they walked past a terrace field, Feng Haochen suddenly stopped in his tracks. Looking at the field, he shook his head and said, "This melon child, I told him to weed, but he plucked the onions instead." As he spoke, he walked over and picked up the dying green onions that had been thrown to the side. He also pulled out the grass, just like a hard-working old farmer. This made Muyu very surprised. Why would a mortal cultivator also need to grow vegetables? "Master, let me do it," Muyu quickly said. Then he moved his hands. The grass in the field was all moved to the side by Muyu. The green onions also returned to their original position. At the same time, they glowed with vitality again. "All right, I seem to have picked up a treasure." Feng Haochen winked at Muyu. Then he clapped his hands and shook off the dirt on them. Muyu usually helped the villagers with some farm work, so he also knew how to grow vegetables. He said, "Master, I can help you grow vegetables in the future." "That's a good idea." Feng Haochen laughed. "Let's go. When I'm not here, you can help me. The rest of the time, I'll do it myself." Muyu still did not understand. "You're the head of a sect. Why do you need to grow vegetables yourself?" Growing vegetables is just an attitude towards life. It's also a way of cultivation. Many cultivators disdain doing this kind of thing. They think it's a trivial matter for mortals, and it's meaningless. In fact, life is all about cultivation. It depends on how you look at a trivial matter. Feng Haochen walked slowly with a happy expression. It was as if this was a very simple matter. Muyu suddenly understood. He had always thought that cultivation was to become stronger, which also meant that he did not have to deal with the trivial matters of the mortal world. However, Feng Haochen told him that life was all about cultivation. This was very refreshing. He could not see through the simple yet extraordinary figure in front of him. In fact, on second thought, if Muyu could see through his cultivation method, then why did Muyu come here? After walking for an unknown amount of time, they finally arrived at the observation deck. However, before the two of them could get close to the rock, two small figures jumped out of nowhere and rushed onto Feng Haochen's shoulders. Muyu thought that they were two monkeys. However, when he looked closely, he saw that they were 2, 3, or 4 years old children. One boy and one girl, wearing a red doo-doo, with 2 cute hairstyles. They sat on Feng Haochen's shoulders, one on the left and one on the right. At the same time, they played with Feng Haochen's white beard. Their faces were full of grievance and joy, which confused Muyu. "Master is back. Master is back. There's food to eat. There's food to eat. The two little urchins shouted at the top of their lungs. They were so happy that the grievance on their faces disappeared. What's wrong, you two? Did you cause trouble again? Feng Haochen asked the two little urchins sitting on his shoulders with a smile. Thank the heavens. Master, if you didn't come back, we would have been starving. A little girl about the same age as Muyu also ran over, her face full of excitement. This little girl was wearing red clothes and looked very energetic, like a red fairy. Muyu couldn't help but take a few more glances at her. Master. A simple and honest young man got up from the rock, rubbing his head. This young man was taller than Muyu by a head and looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. He looked very sturdy. He laughed foolishly, looking very honest. Meow meow, Kong Kong, come down quickly. Master just came back and is very tired. A young man who looked to be in his 20s looked at the two little children on Feng Haochen's shoulders and helplessly called out. This young man was very cultured and elegant, with an elegant demeanor, mature and steady. He was also the oldest among them. No, I won't. The boy Kong Kong grabbed Feng Haochen's beard tightly. I won't either. Meow Meow opened her eyes wide and hugged Feng Haochen's neck. Feng Haochen doted on these two little urchins. He smiled and said, It's fine. What are you all doing here? Where's Yuan? Master. And Shu went to cook. Kong Kong seemed to have thought of something and continued, Master, don't let us eat in Shu's cooking anymore. It's not for humans. Is that so? Before Kong Kong could finish, he was interrupted by an old-fashioned voice, startling Muyu. Unknowingly, a middle-aged man with a tense expression appeared in front of them and stared at Kong Kong. Kong Kong couldn't help but stick out his tongue, not daring to meet Shu's gaze. Sekmaster, you're back. And Shu greeted Feng Haochen in a serious manner. His expression was very serious, without any sadness or joy. He was cold, forming a contrast with the others. The moment he appeared, everyone put away their sloppy appearance. Even Meow Meow and Kong Kong became serious. Oh, right, this is Muyu. He'll be a member of the Falling Dust sect in the future. You two should get to know each other. Feng Haochen was not affected by Shu. He waved at Muyu, and only then did Muyu run over with a smile. Chapter 18. My name is Cheng Yan. I'll be your first senior brother from now on. The oldest youth was Cheng Yan. He smiled and nodded at Muyu. He was a very easygoing person and was about the same age as Bai Liang when Muyu met him. Bai Liang was the first disciple of the Qing Song Taoist. He was very talented and was a genius in the cultivation world. Both his appearance and temperament were extraordinary. On the other hand, Cheng Yan was dressed plainly, but he was elegant and had a reserved temperament. He was not inferior to Bai Liang. Greetings, first senior brother. Muyu cupped his hands and bowed. Cheng Yan was a very reliable big brother. He needed to consult him more in the future. I'm Xiang Nan, your third senior brother. Xiang Nan was a very simple and honest boy. He dressed very casually. Muyu even noticed that there was a hole in his pants, but he didn't seem to care. Greetings, third senior brother. Muyu continued to nod. If Cheng Yan was the first senior brother and Xiang Nan was the third senior brother, then there should be a second senior brother as well. He was just not present. My name is Lan Ling. You have to call me senior sister from now on. Lan Linger said kindly. Greetings, senior sister. Muyu bowed. Lan Ling was actually about the same age as Muyu, but she should have been cultivating for a long time. Greetings, junior brother. My name is Kong Kong. This is my younger sister, Meow Meow. Kong Kong was a little boy wearing a doo-doo. He pointed at Meow Meow and said seriously, Greetings, junior brother. My name is Meow Meow. This is my younger brother, Kong Kong. Meow Meow stuck out her tongue at Muyu. I'm the older brother. You're the younger sister. Kong Kong said unhappily. I'm the older sister. You're the younger brother. Meow Meow was not to be outdone. Muyu thought about it and then said with a smile, Greetings, junior brother and sister. Call me senior sister. Call me senior brother. Kong Kong and Meow Meow said in unison. No, Muyu would never call these two little brats senior brother or sister. These two looked like people who would not be easy to deal with. Who knew if they would use their status as senior brother or sister to pressure him in the future? So he rejected them very straightforwardly. Master, look, the new junior brother is restless. Kong Kong shook Feng Haochen's beard and called out in dissatisfaction. All right, you two little fellows, you haven't reached the age of cultivation yet. I haven't officially accepted you two as my disciples, so there's no need to talk about senior brothers and sisters. Mu Yu is older than you, so he'll be your senior brother in the future, understand? Feng Haochen put the two little urchins down from his shoulders. These two little brats would go around causing trouble all day long, and only Shu would be able to deal with them. Then you have to testify that I'm the elder brother, right? Kong Kong asked with her hands on her hips. Bah, I'm the elder sister, okay? Meow Meow glared at Kong Kong, her two pigtails bouncing up and down. I don't know who came out first, so you two can discuss among yourselves. Feng Haochen looked at these two troublesome fellows and did not want to get involved in this matter. These two children were brought back by Feng Haochen from the refugee camp a few years ago. Their parents had passed away, and they were a boy and a girl in swaddling clothes. Feng Haochen really did not know who was the elder brother or the elder sister. He did not give them an elder or younger brother, and just let them argue about this issue. I'm in Yuan, in charge of supervising your cultivation. You can call me Shu in the future. And Shu just stared at Mu Yu, but it made Mu Yu feel uncomfortable. He was not a person to be trifled with. Mu Yu secretly smacked his tongue, and Shu was probably a very serious person, unlike his master. Under his supervision, they would definitely not slack off in their cultivation. And Shu, how are the other senior brothers and sisters? Are they all on the mountain? Mu Yu also bowed and asked. There's no one else. Everyone in our sect is here, Xiangnan said honestly. Mu Yu's eyes widened. Everyone in the sect was here? Wait, that's not right. Mu Yu counted with his fingers. Including himself, there were 8 people in total. 8 people? There were only 8 people in a sect? Is everyone in our sect really here? Mu Yu thought he had misheard and asked again. Who said they're all here? Lan Ling glared at Xiangnan. Xiangnan's expression froze, and then he quickly covered his mouth and shook his head, indicating that he did not say anything. Xiangnan's reaction made Mu Yu curious. He did not understand why Xiangnan was like this. I knew it. Our sect would not have so few people. Mu Yu scratched his head. How could a sect with only 8 people be considered a sect? At most, it would be a gang, right? Even if it was a gang, there would be dozens or hundreds of people. Second senior brother is not back yet, including you. There are 9 people in our sect now. Lan Ling said to Mu Yu without hesitation. As soon as Lan Ling finished speaking, the surrounding atmosphere seemed to become a little strange. Feng Haochen sighed slightly and turned his gaze to the scenery outside the mountain. Qingyan and Feng Haochen also looked elsewhere. Xiangnan secretly glanced at Lan Ling, and then quickly pretended to be interested in a stone on the ground and kicked it with his foot. And Shu was still serious and did not seem to have changed. The 2 little urchins who were still competing for age tactfully shut their mouths. Then they held hands in a very friendly manner, swinging and swinging without making any sound. It was as if they had once again become a loving brother and sister, or sister and brother. Mu Yu still could not accept this fact. Did this sect really only have 9 people? He remembered what Deacon Sun said before leaving. This sect never accepted disciples, so there were very few people. But no matter how few people there were, it couldn't be so few that it could be counted with 2 hands, right? Then where did second senior brother go? As soon as Mu Yu asked this question, he regretted it. He knew that he had asked a question that he should not have asked, because everyone looked at Mu Yu. Xiangnan blinked hard at Mu Yu, indicating that he should not ask. Chengyan shook his head, and even Kong Kong Meow Meow showed a gloating expression, waiting to watch a good show. And Shu stared at Mu Yu, causing Mu Yu to have goosebumps. Only Feng Haochen was still looking into the distance, thinking about something. There is no second senior brother in our sect, Feng Haochen said lightly. Lan Ling pursed her lips. She wanted to refute her master's words, but she held back. Mu Yu realized something. Could it be that second senior brother had an accident and unfortunately passed away? No wonder the topic of second senior brother was so serious and made the atmosphere awkward. He quickly said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know that second senior brother was no longer in this world." Bah, you're the one who's no longer in this world. Second senior brother is alive and well. It's just that he doesn't want to. It has nothing to do with you. You just need to know that there is such a person. Lan Ling, scolded Mu Yu, not showing any mercy just because Mu Yu is a newcomer. She took a deep breath, calmed herself down, and then walked up the mountain without looking back. Mu Yu choked on Lan Ling's words and felt a little awkward. The worst thing for a newcomer to a sect was to have a bad relationship with others. This was not a good start. However, he was also a little confused. If a legendary second senior brother was not dead, then where did he go? Why were these people unwilling to talk about this non-existent second senior brother? Everyone seemed to be avoiding this topic. Was there something that this second senior brother could not be said? It was a mysterious sect. Not only were there few people, but there was also a seemingly non-existent second senior brother. What kind of sect was this? Muyu did not know what to say, but looking at Lan Ling, she should admire second senior brother very much. That was why she was so angry at him for speaking rudely. It seemed that he had to be careful when talking about second senior brother in front of Lan Ling, in the future. Chapter 19. No one wanted to explain to Mu Yu about this second senior brother, whom he had never met before, so Mu Yu tactfully chose not to ask. In the end, it was Shu who broke the silence. "Sect Master, lunch is ready. Let's go up the mountain." "Huh? Shu, how did you cook so quickly?" Xiangnan forced a smile that was uglier than crying. He looked pleadingly at his master. It was obvious that Shu's cooking had made them suffer. It sounded like a sad thing. "Now that master is back, I think we should improve our meals. Senior brother Xiangnan, didn't you catch a pheasant last time? Hurry up and take it out for master to cook." Kong Kong chimed in. "Okay, I'll go get it." Xiangnan nodded cooperatively and was about to run up the mountain. "I've already cooked it." Shu decisively cut off Xiangnan's last thought. "Okay, let's go up the mountain then." Feng Haochen patted Mu Yu's shoulder and led the way up the mountain. Xiangnan and Kong Kong looked like they were about to die. Only Qingyan had no choice but to ask Mu Yu to follow. Although he wasn't used to Shu's food, he wouldn't show it. Mu Yu grumbled inwardly. Wasn't Shu's cooking really that bad? This sect with so few people was quite amazing. The sect master was actually the one who cooked. If he wasn't around, the others would feel like they were eating dirt every day. Mu Yu was very curious about the falling dust sect, which was ranked last among all the cultivation sections. Not only were there few people in this sect, but they were also very shabby. The houses were simple wooden huts, and everyone had their own room. The immortal abodes with white jade tiles and majestic immortal palaces he had imagined didn't appear. Instead, they looked like ordinary farmhouses with simple living facilities. It was like a secluded paradise in the mountains. Mu Yu had always thought that the land of immortals would be filled with immortal qi and spiritual beasts everywhere. Unfortunately, everything in front of him was too different for what he had imagined. No one cared about Mu Yu's thoughts. Everyone walked towards the hall unwillingly, as if it was a dangerous place with ferocious beasts. Only Feng Haochen and Shu walked in calmly. Lan Ling was already sitting inside. She frowned as she looked at the food on the table. Her expression was definitely not one of desire. Everyone found their own seats and sat down. Mu Yu also found a place to sit down. The table was long and could seat 10 or so people. Shu's cooking wasn't just unpalatable, it was unpalatable. Mu Yu finally understood Xiangnan and the others' expressions before they ate their chopsticks. He felt that it took a lot of courage to eat this food. Mu Yu felt that he would rather fight 10 big grizzly bears 100 rounds than eat this strange food. The pheasant that Xiangnan had caught looked very appetizing. When it was pulled open, there were still traces of blood. Mu Yu used to like eating chicken, but after tasting Shu's pheasant, he felt that he could go on a diet for 2 months. "It's delicious," Mu Yu said with tears in his eyes. He couldn't be too rude since he was new here, but he despised himself for saying such things against his will. In the end, he didn't know if he choked or was moved by his spirit of swallowing such food, but he actually felt like crying. Eat more if it's delicious. Kong Kong put a drumstick into Muyu's bowl with a smirk. Muyu really wanted to slap this little guy. How dare he add insult to injury at a time like this? He quickly said, "Children are still growing. They need to eat more meat to grow taller." Then, he righteously put the drumstick back into Kong Kong's empty bowl. "Senior Muyu, after eating this drumstick, we're all on the same side." Meow Meow quickly put the drumstick in her bowl into Muyu's bowl. "Master is tired. Why don't you give it to him?" Muyu put the drumstick into Feng Haochun's bowl. Feng Haochun looked at these good children who were giving in to each other. He wasn't angry. He picked up the drumstick and tasted it. Then he said, "Forget it. I'll cook myself. Stop fooling around. Take the dishes back to the kitchen. Xiangnan, go start the fire." Yay! Kong Kong and Meow Meow were so excited that they danced. Muyu also wanted to high-five them. Later, when he saw Anshu's expressionless face, he forcibly suppressed this impulse and said seriously, "Actually, it's still edible." Both Kong Kong and Meow Meow secretly looked down on Muyu. Even Lan Ling curled her lips at Muyu. It turned out that Feng Haochun's culinary skills were indeed much better than Anshu's. The dishes looked, smelled, and tasted good. Muyu was also amazed. He really didn't expect that the high and mighty sect leader would not put on any airs in this sect. He could even cook himself. This was almost impossible for other sections. A few people who seemed to have never seen the world swept away all the dishes cooked by the sect leader. Only then did they get up to clean up the bowls and chopsticks in satisfaction. Everyone was very self-aware. There was no special servant to serve them. Everything was self-sufficient. They were noisy and full of laughter, just like a big family. In the afternoon, the others disappeared. Feng Haochun didn't tell him what to do. He just asked him to familiarize himself with the environment. From tomorrow onwards, he would be cultivating with them. Kong Kong and Meow Meow were running around. They were too young and didn't need to cultivate. At this time, no one knew where they went. They probably went somewhere to fish for bird eggs. Muyu didn't know where to go. He went around to the back of the straw hut where they ate and saw a clear spring. Clean spring water flowed out of the spring, forming a spring mouth below. The water continued to overflow and flowed down to form a pond. Beside the pond was a vegetable garden. There were some fresh vegetables and some immortal herbs beside the garden. Muyu touched the immortal herbs and felt that they were completely different from the plants he usually saw. Unfortunately, the immortal herbs seemed to have a resistance against him and didn't allow him to control them. If you want to control these immortal herbs, you'll have to wait until your body cultivates spiritual energy. Feng Haochun was loosening the soil in the vegetable garden. He said without raising his head, "If you want to take a bath, you could take a bath in this pond. The spring water above is for drinking. You can't dirty it. There's a cliff behind it. The scenery there is not bad. You can go and take a look." "Master, do you want me to help you loosen the soil?" Muyu asked. Feng Haochun shook his head. "If I want to finish loosening the soil quickly, I can use my sword to control it. It can be done in the blink of an eye. But what's the point? My purpose of growing vegetables is not just to eat, but to do it as a hobby." Muyu thought about it. He still couldn't understand his master's state of mind. However, he remembered that night when his master just waved his hand and shattered the surrounding plants. If it was loosening the soil, it wouldn't be a difficult thing. He smiled and walked toward the back of the mountain. This mountain was called Luo Chun Mountain. Behind Luo Chun Mountain was a cliff called Luo Chun Cliff. There was a huge banyan tree on Luo Chun Cliff. It was unknown how many years this banyan tree had been growing for. Its roots were intertwined, and its branches were luxuriant. There were also 2 swings hanging on it. It should be where Kong Kong and Meow Meow usually played. Muyu stood under the banyan tree. There was a large stone slab under the banyan tree. It could easily fit 5 or 6 people. Muyu touched the banyan tree. He felt the vicissitudes of life from the banyan tree. His heart was at peace. He looked into the distance. At the foot of Luo Chun Mountain, there was a huge forest. There were flocks of birds in the forest. It was full of vitality. At the end of the forest, there were a few small villages. He could also vaguely see the scattered farmland. Further away, there was a city. That city was only a vague outline. It was estimated to be a few hundred li away from here. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.